Oh yeah, I wanted to start with gratitudes again. Oh, I'm really glad you're all here. This is so great. I'm just like, this is so fun. I love this community. I loved our conversation after 3 o'clock yesterday. It's really nice to share space with you all. And I didn't realize how isolated. I'm a very, not very social person, so COVID's okay for me, but this level of isolation is okay for me, I should say. But I didn't realize how nice it has been. It was really nice to hang with you all yesterday. So I'm excited to get started today. Okay, so here's our course agenda. We've gotten through our introduction and observation and development. You all can see this, right? We're good? Yeah, can I get a nod or a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Awesome,
Can
thank you.
see it.
Okay, and we started our environment, and then we're going to finish our environment today. That's going to be a big part of our day, and then we're going to go into discipline and limit setting at the last part. So let's talk about our 5 areas of the Montessori environment, our room by room guide, and then we're going to do some environmental design, and then we're going to do our limit setting piece. So here we go. Here's our environment. Remember yesterday when I showed you this, and if you stayed after, I gave it away. Sorry. These are our 5 areas we've been talking about: practical life, sensorial, language, cultural studies and art, and mathematics. And in the classroom, we would have a different area of the classroom for each of these. In your home, you might have one shelf. You might have practical life all over the house. You might have all of these things. You might have your language work with your puzzles and your math works. You might have it all together. So that's okay. But these are kind of the areas that we're thinking about. The piece that we're missing is movement, right? Like, what did you like that? That was my technical genius that I figured out on my Google Slides. That's the only thing I can do on Google Slides. I made it spin. There's like a huge movement thing that's missing, right? And if you talk to Montessorians, they will tell you that there is gross motor activity in the classroom, and there absolutely is. When we're doing table washing, we're doing big movements. When we're sweeping, we're doing big movements. But these toddlers, they want to move all the time. So I'm going to add a little bit about movement here that I find really, really valuable, especially in the home, especially if you're in the city, especially if you're in an environment where there isn't a lot of climbing equipment. Let's talk about how to do that in the home. Oh, look, it spun again. I didn't mean for it to do that. That was exciting. Okay, so let's go piece by piece through each section. So first, we're going to go into practical life. This is Zavi washing dishes a million years ago. So practical life is any activity that has to do with everyday life skills. So toddlers spend most of their time in practical life. So this is where a large part of our focus can be when we are considering our home environment. So we can do, this is like water transferring, right? So pouring, scooping, dumping. If your toddler is in their high chair, or their infant, if you have a high chair, or at their table, and they're just dumping their glass of water into their bowl, they're ready for some pouring work. Let's get that for them. Let's meet that need in an appropriate way. There's spooning, tongue transferring, like any kind of tongs. I'm going to show you a bunch of different tongs. Tweezing. So these are fine motor things. These are muscle coordination, right? Dressing, zippers, buttons, snaps, Velcro, anything that has to do with getting dressed, putting on a hat. Putting on socks is a really fun one. And this is nice. So when you're doing your practical life, maybe you have an appointment at 3 o'clock that you have to get your child to. Maybe at 2 o'clock, you bring out the socks and you just start, because you don't want to be rushing a child through dressing at this stage. This is a big part of their work. Maybe instead of having only doing socks when you have a place to go, maybe you have a pair of socks on a shelf in a basket, and they can go to that shelf and they can take those socks out and they can practice. Socks is a huge source of pride. When children can learn how to do their own socks, wow. Some children do it very, very early. I've seen in the classroom a 15-month-old putting their socks on. I don't know how. This child continued to just blow us away with their desire to do things very early. And then you have my child who's 5 years old and still doesn't want to put on his socks. So there's no pressure to get anyone to do anything. It's just to notice that interest and keep going with it. So self-care is going to be anything that has to do with hygiene, brushing their teeth, anything like that. Okay, so A big part of this is your community, right? Like we were just talking about building that community. This is a nanny share. This is my friend Parker on the right here in the green shirt. Parker is an only child. Parker actually is a sibling now, but Parker was an only child at the time. And we were able to develop a community with other families in the building. We put a sign up in the building and said, is there anyone who wants to join our community? And there were two other families that joined. The other child is not here now. This is my child in the picture. But this is a mealtime. So when we have a community mealtime, what we can do is we can set up an environment where the children can get their own things and they can set the table. So I don't have a picture of it, unfortunately, but there was a little cupboard that we had for Parker where we put cloth napkins and plates and placemats and cups and silverware, and we put them all in there. And then every day when it was time to have our community meal, which part of it was them helping me prep, right? And then part of it was them having to wait, and waiting is an important practice because we wait for things to cook. And then part of it was them each having a role. So I would say, Zavi, and this is Zavi in the foreground here. I'd say, Zavi, can you get the placemats today? We need 3 today because Louie's not here. So we only need 3. And then I would say, Parker, can you please get 3 plates and carry them over to the table so carefully? And then everyone would have a different role. And then we learned where to put them all. It's a little messy. You don't have to fix it. You can if it's not a situation that they can work with. But then you can also see that I have my own plate of food here and my cushion is there on the floor. So I'm sitting down at floor level. If you are physically able to sit at their space with them and eat with them, this builds community. If you can eat, whenever you can eat the same food that they're eating, this builds community. If we're doing things like sitting, if I were sitting on the couch and like eating with the plate on my knees, right? Like we do, if I was standing in the kitchen and eating, which happens sometimes, right? This is what they see. They want to be like us. If we want to help them learn that we sit at the table when we eat, we need to do it too. We are part of the community. So here's some more practical life activities. This is Nate. My friend Nate is doing a bean work, and it looked like the beans maybe have spilled out of the containers. It was a bean transfer work with that ladle. And you can see, I'm sure you have this in the kitchen that you're in already, right? Nate is out of the oral stage, so we can do dried beans. And Nate is kind of making his own thing out of this. And that's okay. That's cool. Looks like he's cleaning up a little bit. And here's Nora on the right. And Nora is working on peeling a banana. And there's a lesson for peeling a banana on the video list that I have to share with you from YouTube. And the idea is not that Nora needs to peel the banana exactly the way that I have shown Nora, but the idea is that I'm going to provide the lesson to give Nora the opportunity and the skill to be able to do it independently. So Nora doesn't need to wait for me. I can provide that on a shelf maybe when Nora gets a little bigger, and then Nora can do the peeling without needing me to be there. So setting up independence. So here's more practical life activities. This is Kaden on the left, tonging some pom-poms. Pom-poms are great if you don't have them in your professional supplies. I recommend them. Your families may give you a budget and you can pop these in. If you have a little storage space, they're nice. You can use them for anything. So Caden's using kitchen tongs. You probably have these. Smaller tongs are easier for smaller hands. And then we have a whisk over here and we're making something, I don't know, it looks like an omelet maybe with Caden and Zyler. So more kitchen work. And tools, you notice it's not a plug-in blender, right? So we're not talking about anything that they don't know how it works. In Montessori, we always want to know how it works. So if I have like a mixer, you know, I'm talking about like the things that the beaters, whatever they are, if we don't know how it works, it can be, I don't know if it's confusing, but it's not as interesting. So that's why in a classroom, we would have a broom instead of a vacuum. Of course, they come at the end of the day and they vacuum, but this is the idea that we use the materials that we can see how they work so we can understand them. Here's a small community table. This is the family with twins that I worked for at the beginning. They had 2 children, so they opted for a small community table that they could sit at, and they just sat there with them. They got rid of their dining room table for a while and sat there at the little table with their children. And we would do the same thing with these children. We would have the children serve each other the food. So we would have a serving bowl. And I would say, Zyler, can you please serve Zavi some chickpeas? And Zyler could do that at, you know, so many months old. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe like 18 months, 20 months. It's going to depend on the child that you have and their motor skills, and then also the trust that you build. It just takes time. So try it, always have them try it. And if it doesn't work, you can provide more scaffolding and step back a little bit. And if it does work and you see they're ready for the next thing, you can offer them the next task. Can you carry this bowl to the sink? That kind of thing. You can do the next thing, the next thing. Looks like Zavi's cutting some apples in the right picture there. So making muffins and sweeping. A little cleaning set is always really nice in the kitchen for a child to be able to access so they can sweep whenever they like. They don't have to ask us for it. It's just there and it's child size. I think Zavi has the mop in this picture. That mop is not very functional, but I don't think Zavi ever noticed. Okay, if you have an outdoor space, that's amazing. Any kind of, if you can build a vegetable garden, your children can do a lot. They can dig in the dirt next to you. They can plant seeds, right? Tiny planting seeds. They can water the plants. They can do a lot of things in the garden. It's really nice. If you don't have an outdoor space, I think we talked about this yesterday, you can get a little herb garden for a window box. You can have house plants. There's a lot of plant watering is a really nice activity that children can do at a pretty young age, and it helps them feel like they're part of the home community. So, and also you can do Montessori with very little money. So if you don't want to go out and buy a bunch of houseplants, you can get some clippings from a friend or a neighbor and you can grow clippings. People will give you that with a little pile of dirt. So plants are a nice one. So here is a tonging work that Zavi is doing on the left. And ideally for this to be purposeful, Zavi should be tonging those blocks into something. But I don't have that there and I don't know why. That might've been tongs from a different work that Zavi chose to put with those blocks. I'm not sure. But you can see, you can do this out of anything. So if I just had another empty bowl and maybe put this on a tray, then the whole work would be together and Zavi could take the whole thing off the shelf and bring it to the floor and tong from one basket to the other. And then Parker's over here with a spray bottle of water, wiping washing the window. And beyond that door is actually Parker's dad worked from home. And so Parker was always trying to get in that door to go see dad working from home. But that was a compromise that Parker was willing to do, was willing to wash the window while daddy was working. So here is my friend Nora again, and Nora's drinking from an open cup. So we talked about this yesterday. Some children can do this right away. Some need a little more time, and that's okay. So meals are opportunities for independence. And I think, I don't know how many of you have practiced baby-led weaning or division of responsibility from Ellen Satter, but let's talk about that for a minute. So autonomy with feeding is a really valuable practice. If you are spoon feeding a baby, a typically developing baby, purees, and you don't know about baby-led weaning, check it out. It's very cool. The idea is that when babies are breastfed from the beginning, right? So specifically, we're talking about breastfeeding at this moment. When babies are breastfed, we trust that they know how much they need to take. They take until either the breast is empty or they're full, right? And they let us know when we trust that and we don't worry about it if they're making their weight at the pediatrician and everything's developing normally. So when we start to spoon feed them, we have an idea of how much children need to eat. Or if we put food on their plate, we have an idea of what we think a toddler or an infant should be consuming. And instead of trusting them, that can put some pressure on it around food. And I think there's a lot of pressure around toddlers around food. So we can take that out of the picture. So Ellen Satter's division of responsibility with feeding, the idea is that the parent or caregiver is responsible for the what, when, and where, and the child is responsible for how much they want to eat and whether or not they want to eat. So, and then in baby-led weaning, we just provide finger foods from the start. Again, some babies are better at this than others. I have supported about 8 babies and children through this now, along with my own. And it's really incredible to see this like fine motor development and pincer grasp that really correlates time-wise about that 6-month mark when babies can start to really grab at things on a tray if you have them in a high chair. So very, very cool to see that development really accelerate when they're feeding themselves. So baby-led weaning, look into it if you're interested. If you don't know about it, learn about it. There's a lot to it. You should learn about it before. Don't just start it because Katie said start it. I'm not saying start it. I'm saying learn about it. You have to know about choking and gagging and stuff. Okay, so more practical life, more tongs. There's tongs everywhere. When you're in a classroom, what we often do is we will take out, and you can do this at home, I highly recommend it. Tongs, such a great fine motor activity. You can take the tongs out and replace them with a different set of tongs that function a little bit differently. You can take out the materials that you're tonging. You can change out the materials that you're tonging, the vessel that you're tonging into, to keep it interesting. So if you notice this is sitting on the shelf and your child hasn't touched it in a couple weeks and they're bored and they've successfully completed this and they've moved on, you can switch out the materials but keep the activity and just keep it interesting. So we're doing this all the time in the classroom. I'm showing you a lot of classroom pictures today because there's so much changeover in the classroom because we have like 14 children in there all the time. So these are nice tools to have in your kitchen. This is a juicer. Children can peel clementines and then, or I guess you would maybe cut a clementine and then they can juice it really easily. So I guess if you cut it and put it on the tray and then they would juice it, that's a great activity for practice. And there's an apple slicer and core that they might need some help with, and they're going to need to have a lesson to learn how to keep their hands away from the blade. A banana slicer and then a mortar and pestle is always a really fun tool. So here's a work that I created. We had a child in our classroom who loved the sound of, or they loved the reaction that they got out of the chair. They would push the chair back on the floor, and we had these stone floors, and they would push the chair back and it would make a really loud sound. And it would distract everyone from their work. And I'm a sensory sensitive person, so it used to just make me bonkers. And so I said, okay, I have to put felt bottoms on these chairs. And I was going to do it during my prep time. And I said, wait a minute, there's some 2 to 3-year-olds in this classroom who might really like this activity. So I set up a work and I put it on the shelf. And the next day I went into school and, Parker and Graham weren't doing much. They were kind of wandering around. And I said, hey, Parker, hey, Graham, do you want to come help me with this work? Come check it out. And they did. And they came over and they helped me. And I gave them a lesson. I showed them how to sand the bottom of the chair leg, and then we sprayed the cloth, and then we wiped it off and waited for it to dry, and we put the little felt piece on. The only thing that's missing from this tray is a little receptacle, maybe to put the bottom sticker in, the piece of paper that it would go off, so it would go then into the trash. But you can think through these things, right, as you do them, and you would try it out first before you provide it for them. This is just an example of how you can make a work out of anything. Anything that you want to get done, you can make it work and they can join you. So here's a shelf. There is a spooning work on the left. That's a little spoon with erasers in there. There's a corn on the cob it's uncooked with some tongs. Excuse me. There's a really cool tong set, middle shelf on the right with walnuts. That's tonging walnuts. Just think about your allergies. Bottom left is containers to open and close. And then bottom right is a lunchbox full of Tupperware for them to open and close. So they can unzip it. There's also a little napkin in there, and there's a little fork and spoon. I think on the napkin was embroidered where the fork and spoon and the plate go. There's a little plate in there with a cup, and then they could take it all out and set it up and open up the Tupperware, and there's like a little wooden sandwich they could take out. So that's a little pretend play as we're talking about fantasy, right? It's in the classroom because it's practical life, because it's set up. It's setting a place at a placemat. So there you go. That's how we cross over. Here's cutting wooden fruit, again, pretend, but for younger children who are not quite ready to do the actual food prep with an actual knife, we would direct the younger children over here if they saw the older children using a knife. And then there's some multi-step works with bubbles, anything with water and bubbles. So those are several steps. On the right there is they would create bubbles from that little setup. Bottom left is soap grating. And then the bottom right, I can't remember what that one is, but they love this like soap and water work. So you can put these together for them. Okay, top left, so this is the classroom. This is a toddler classroom, 15 months to 3 years we were in this classroom. It's a big age range because you have mouthers still at 15 months, and then you have 3-year-olds who want lots of tiny things. So this is tricky if you have this age group, this age span, I should say. So top left there on that shelf is the rock with the water. This is a really simple activity, and it's very like regulating and organizing for them. They just get so much peace out of like just running the brush over the rock and making it wet. That one doesn't leave the shelf. That's a really heavy rock. There's a sponge on the top of the other shelf on that blue tray to the right is a sponge and water work. And we put a little bit of food coloring in the water so that they don't think it's drinking water. So they understand the difference between what is coming out of the tap and what we're doing for a work. Sometimes they still don't understand depending on their age and their needs, but that's the goal. And then we have a natural sponge. So that the whole act of that is filling that sponge with water. So squeezing or getting it wet and then transferring that water over to the next bowl and squeezing the water out of it. This is a really great activity. It's so, so simple and they love it. And they just go back to it, back to it, back to it. And then at the end, when all the water has been squeezed out of one bowl and it's in the other bowl, then if they don't walk away from it, they might pick up that bowl and pour it back into the first bowl. So as you do these, as you make these, remember to try them out first. And then beneath that one on that shelf down there is pom-poms in 2 containers. One's empty, one has pom-poms in it. And that's a strawberry huller. So strawberry hullers are really cool tools. They're like just little tiny tongs for taking like the green stem off the strawberry. That's really fun for them. They can squeeze the pom-poms. This is, sorry for the dark picture. This is from my training. I wanted to take a picture of this shelf. This is just a lot of simple stuff. Water transfer, spoon transfer on the bottom there. There's a mirror polishing work in the middle on the bottom shelf. So it's a little tiny sponge and a little spray bottle, a beautiful spray bottle. So a lot of what we talk about is beautiful objects. We want the children to be drawn to the objects. So this is where I go to yard sales. And I'm always looking for tiny, beautiful objects that like someone's grandmother doesn't use anymore. And these people are like, what am I going to do with these tiny things? And I collect all of them and I keep them and I put them in my works. So once you start looking for this stuff, it's really, really nice. And you can start to build these works. And if you have a space and you want to do this, what I do, and it helps now because I have children of my own, so I'm collecting some activities too, but this is part of the service that I provide to families is I loan out my materials. Did I say this to you yesterday? I can't remember. I loan out my materials to families. So right now I have an 8-month-old and my 13-month-old is over our latches board. Our latches board has been out for a while. If you don't know what that is, it's like a little board with a hook and eye latch and like different kinds of ways to open doors, things like that, but it's just on a board so they can practice it. So I loaned that over to them because their infant is just starting to get interested in that. So I have all these things. I have basement space and I have them organized in Tupperwares by approximate age is how I decided to organize it. So if you have this space and you want to offer this service, it does, it's very appealing to potential families to be able to say to them, if you don't want to buy a bunch of stuff, I've got stuff that you can utilize while we're together and I'm happy to share this stuff with you. And that's kind of a nice like bonus for the families that we work with. So this is Nora. Okay, so practical life, let's step aside from that for a minute and move on to sensorial. Sorry, I didn't realize that was the last slide. Okay, sensorial. So this is Nora, my little friend who was reading the book and drinking from an open cup. Anything having to do with the senses is sensorial. So touch is a big one here. Nora has a little basket of gourds, and I highly recommend when it's the season that you get a couple of these gourds. They're really nice to touch. They're really interesting. Just make sure you clean them because they're going to mouth them if you have a baby. And I just put them in a little bowl or a basket and I put them on the shelf. There's nothing to do with them. There's no lesson. I mean, the lesson might be taking them out and touching them and, oh, it feels so bumpy. And look at that green stripe on that one. And it could be a language work, right? If you want to take it out and show it to someone. And really, they like to just explore with them. And then as they get older, you can do more fun stuff with it. So this was, I'm not a huge fan of sensory bins. Sensory bins, there's not really, like the scooping and the pouring. And if you like them, that's great. They just frustrate me because I feel like it's always a mess. But if you're ready to make a mess, that's cool with the rice and the beans I find that children like to just take that and pour it on the floor and see what Nanny Katie does. And I'm like, everything's fine. That's cool. That's great. So I don't usually put the tiny things in the sensory bin, but it does end up being a nice space for like a painting project like this. So this was 3 children. And you can see there's some paint in one side and they opted to paint the the gourds. And then Levi always really liked the feeling of the paint on his own skin. And if you have the wherewithal to allow a child to do that and go through that, I highly recommend it because they just get so much joy from painting their skin. It feels so good. I had one child who, he's the one who taught me how to do this actually. He would take off all of his clothes when the paint came out and he would just cover himself. He was, I think, 3 at the time, would cover himself in paint because he loved the way it felt. And this is all non-toxic, totally child safe paint, always and only. This is a fun one. So this is another one that would be like in a sensory bin. You can see this is a sensory bin we had at school. So the night before we would take and put a bunch of objects into a tray with some colored water, and then we would put it in the freezer. And then in the morning, you can take it out and put it in a little dish bucket and give everybody a little chisel and a hammer and a little bit of salt and a scrub brush, and they can scrub those animals out of there. And that's really fun. It's another simple one that just, it feels really, really special and fun. So here's one with textures. This is texture. This is square, or I guess this isn't textures, it's fabric matching. And so there's a piece of felt here that my colleague has sewn these squares onto of different fabrics. And then their matching pieces are inside of containers, in little containers in a basket. So they have different closures so the children can practice opening. And so when this is on the shelf, that piece of felt with the fabrics on it is rolled up and it's put inside the basket. And then when the child has the lesson, they learn that we take it out and we unroll it, and then we have to open the containers to find the matches. So this is maybe for a child who's doing that level of discrimination. So maybe about almost 2, maybe a 20-month-old and up would maybe do something like this. It's going to depend on your child again. So this is a really cool one. I love this one. This is smelling, right? How do we bring smelling in to our environment? You can take an infant and you can bring them into the kitchen and you can just start smelling the spices. I do this with the infant I hang out with right now all the time. We go in and we label the spices, and I take the cap off and then I offer it to them to smell it. And it's nice, and they really enjoy it, especially as they're starting food and they're getting ready to start food. They seem to really enjoy this activity. So my colleague has done this for the shelf, the work shelf, where they put 3 different smells and they put pictures down of what those matching smells are. And one thing that was really cool that she did is when she put this together and she tried out the work first, right? We're always going to try out the work that we do. She was putting the salt shakers back into the little picnic basket here, and it was too loud, and she knew this was coming. She's an experienced Montessorian. I love her. She's amazing. So she put these little felt pads in the bottom. So it was a sound damper, so that the point of interest does not become the sound. The point of interest stays where we intend it to be, which is the smells. Does that make sense? Sound blocks is a really fun one for young babies. These are kind of expensive, but your parents might be interested in investing in these, or you might want them for your personal collection. These are really nice, and these are a preliminary activity. In the 3 to 6 classroom, there's a lot of sound discrimination activities that are really nice. So this is like a simple one. It's almost like a rattle, but they all have different beads inside, and you can see the beads. Okay, let's talk about language. You guys doing okay? Yeah, doing well? Okay. So language is going to be any materials that incorporate language into them. So here are some that we have in the classroom, but language is going to be everywhere in your home. So the Very Hungry Caterpillar work is a felt board, and we just have all of the foods from the Very Hungry Caterpillar made in felt. Someone made them in felt, so we can put them along with the story, and the children can put them out. It becomes like a counting activity. The little blocks have animals on them. We can talk about that. And the bottom left is a matching work, so it's vehicles, and on the right side there's cars. Or the cards, sorry, that go with the vehicles, and the children can take it out and match them up. And I'm going to show you where you can get those cards for free a little bit later. So that's a fun one. Top left in the red bag is a mystery bag. So we would put all kinds of textures and things, maybe everything's starting with the sound If you have a 3-year-old who's interested in sounds, you could, and you find things around the house. Or maybe you could do all kitchen objects where you put a whisk in there and you put like I don't know, a tong or whatever you have from the kitchen. You could put a bunch of things in and have them feel it. That's that stereognostic sense again, right? Where they're going to be reaching in and feeling. Or you can use it to get their attention. If they're going out of control and it's like a rainy day and you're like, how am I going to get through the day? I got to get their attention. You throw some things in a mystery bag and you say, hey, come look what I have. Look what I found. I'm going to put this together. Let's see. And you come and have them sit down with you and then you pull things out one by one and go, oh my goodness, look what I found. And then it can be whatever it is. But it's that buildup and it becomes a language work to sit together. So here's one. This is a gourd matching work that I think I probably made seasonally. Not super realistic because there aren't pink gourds and black gourds, but it was cheap. It was like I think these were at Target for like $1. And I just said, hey, I can make a quick work out of these. And I threw some Velcro on the back to make it interesting. Again, there's that page is laminated. I love laminators. You can get a laminator on Amazon. Well, don't go to Amazon if you can avoid it, but you can get laminators for really cheap wherever you want to go. And your family might invest in one if you tell them how much you want it and how useful it's going to be. Okay, let's talk about cultural studies and art. So this is often a criticism of the Montessori method that there's not enough emphasis on art. And I think the art that we see in Montessori classrooms is very limited. So incorporate art how you see fit. Make it personal to you, to your culture, to your family, to your family's culture. Whatever it is, you can do this and you can get creative. It's art, right? So steer away from the Impressionists. I can't tell you how I love Impressionist artwork. I do. I can't tell you how many Montessori classrooms I walk into and there's like Monet painting. I'm so sick of Monet, I could barf. Like there are so many incredible artists in the world. So go to a different part of the world to find your art. At least when you're looking for it, you don't actually have to go there. And music. So in a music, in a Montessori classroom, it's usually very quiet. So if you want music, if you're the kind of person who wants music or you find your child thrives on it, think about what can be in the background. If it has words, remember that a lot of our children are in that sensitive period for language, so it can be distracting. And if you want to use music and make it a big gross motor focus, that's great. And then make it in the foreground and make it an activity that you're doing together. Okay, so our goal is that our children are going to have an appreciation for this stuff. So here are some shelf ideas. Gluing feathers to paper. This looks so simple. It's really tricky and it's a really nice thing because when they get the feathers get stuck to their hands with the glue and then they have to get it off and it gets stuck to their other hand and then they have to get it off and they get really interested in this and it's a fun one and it takes them a while. You can do paper beads on a pipe cleaner, hole punching, cutting with scissors is a great fine motor activity. You can make your Play-Doh at home. There's a lot of stuff on Pinterest. Toddler Montessori art activities, just be discriminatory. It's not there's not necessarily a category of art for Montessori. Like we don't do a lot of that in our training. We don't learn what the Montessori art activities are. So I think it's just with the focus is on low tech, fine motor development and creativity. And then there's an Instagram account that I like if you're on Instagram. It's called Days with Gray. And it's not necessarily Montessori, but she does really simple activities. And I think she has one like Sunday night. She has you prep one for your Monday morning. And she'll do things like painter's tape in a grid. And then she'll have a basket of socks. And she'll have the children like match the socks in the grid. It's very simple. And it's something that the children can do first thing on Monday morning. So Days with Gray is a nice inspiration. I like that site. Okay. So here is our shelf. This is Play-Doh on the top left. This is stickers in the middle, though it looks like there aren't very many stickers in there. So there's one container has stickers in it, and the other container is a receptacle for the paper after they peel the sticker. Peeling stickers is a nice activity. You probably have stickers, your nannies. There's other molding clay there on the right. Cutting with scissors, hole punching is nice. Gluing is always good. Simple. Okay, let's have this conversation. One of the big criticisms of Montessori that I'm going to say that I have is that is traditionally a very white, able-bodied, privileged space. We cannot have this course without having this conversation. It is embarrassing how seldom this conversation is happening in real life. this is where we need to shift. So I am not very well versed in this stuff. I'm getting more comfortable. I have a lot of privilege in my world that I haven't had to face this until the last several years when it has come into my field of vision. This is really important, especially if you are a white nanny with a white family, right? This is critical. These children, because of their birth, are going to be movers and shakers, right? These are privileged families that we're working with. We need to introduce children to these concepts. So how do we do this in our classroom, in our home environment? This is a work. So these folks here, I made a couple years ago, a picture matching work. And it's funny because I brought it into my classroom and it was very controversial. And everyone was like, why do you have to do that? And what I did is I took pictures of famous Black Americans and I laminated them. And then I made smaller pictures and I put them in a basket on the shelf and I put Velcro on each one. So the children could walk around the room and match up the pictures. There was a little Barack Obama and a big Barack Obama and a little Ruby Bridges and a big Ruby Bridges. And they would walk around the room. And then they learned the names of them, which was really cool. Barack Obama was over by the diaper changing station and we had a 20-month-old saying, Barack Obama, Barack Obama. So it was really cool that like these children, you know, potentially don't have this many Black faces in their world on a regular day. So, you know, I think this goes for Indigenous cultures too. I think this goes for Latino cultures too. This goes for the whole world. So if you are bringing a different culture into your nanny family than what their culture is, and you feel comfortable bringing your culture in, I think that's beautiful. Let's share music with them. Let's share art with them. Let's share stories of folks who they might not otherwise hear the stories of. And as you're looking through books, sorry, I'm going off and I'm not going on my slides here. As you're looking for books, look for non-white, non-male, differently abled, alternatively gendered protagonists. Look for it. It's hard to find. To find a character in a book who's in a wheelchair and the story is not about them being in a wheelchair, that's hard to find. There's not a lot of books published out there. If you have a book list, share it with me. I want to know it. Theconsciouskid.org is a great, great resource. This is going to be on your resource list. I love it. HereWeRead.com. They have a great diversity section on their website. You can go check it out, diversity books. And then Montessori for Social Justice started up a few years ago, and it's a really great organization. I think they have an annual conference that was skipped this year, but they do a lot of great work, social justice work to change the dynamics of the space that we are all sharing together. So I'm certainly not the person to speak for other folks, but I do feel like it's important that we introduce our children to the stories of non-white folks. So that's the beginning of that conversation. Let's talk mathematics and puzzles and what does this look like for a small child? So this is my friend. Here, let me go back a little bit. This is my friend Louie doing that latches board that I was telling you about. So at this age, remember, mathematics looks like patterns, discrimination, sorting, matching. So here we have, you probably have seen these, maybe you haven't recognized them as mathematics works before. These are pretty basic. On the bottom left, I just want to point out, this is a puzzle where, you know, one piece fits into each space. There are like 10 or 12 pieces to this puzzle. We've only put out 4. If you have something like this, toddlers don't need a lot. They just need a few. And you can rotate those out so they have new shapes to try. Bottom right is a small, medium, large. They're caps on a laminated piece of black circles. Not the most creative work, but I needed something to keep them busy. So I put that out there and it's inside of a bag that they can practice the zipping and the unzipping. You can do this out of any materials. So these are some purchased materials. These are those knobbed cylinders I was telling you about. And there's the bigger scale in the 3 to 6 classroom. There is a, like a posting, what would you call that? Like a peg shape matching thing. There's a counting shapes thing there on the right. I'm not using my Montessori language, I'm sorry. On the bottom right is a texture matching. That's nice. So if you have an infant, you know, you might just take one set of these. So it's like wool, it's like a wool triangle and a silk triangle and a velvet triangle and or rectangle and a cotton rectangle. And you might, if you have an infant, you might just take it out and say, oh, it's a little scratchy, or oh, it's so soft, whatever language you might use. With a toddler, you could put them side by side and give them a lesson on matching those together and stacking them up so that they match. Here's bean sorting. So again, not in the oral stage, right? We're not going to be able to do this. There's chickpeas, black beans, and pinto beans. And you can see how that works. It's pretty simple. It's a nice fine motor activity. If you have dried beans in your kitchen, you can do this. You can sort, and you can sort candy bars. It doesn't matter. You can sort whatever you want. And then also this is sensorial, right? Because it's a touch practice. So there's lots of crossover in our toddler environment. Okay. So let's talk about movement space. This is the Katie method now. We're off the Montessori method and we're on the Katie method. This is like Montessori plus lots and lots of gross motor. I find myself in the company of children who love gross motor. Maybe you don't. Some children aren't. I don't meet those children. I don't know them. So I just want to say that first and foremost, safety, safety, safety is our number one. We always have to practice safety with our children. So go with your gut on this. If you are a more cautious person, that's fine. We can talk about risk taking. Risk taking is really important for infants and toddlers, but we always need to be prepared to be there to spot, right? We just talked about yesterday falling down the stairs. Children, I always say parenting is a series of near misses, right? I think nannies, we don't let our children take as many risks maybe as like I do as a parent. So yeah, guard other people's children very well. Here's movement space. Children need a lot of physical movement to satisfy their proprioceptive and vestibular learning. Remember that proprioceptive is the space where you can walk through a room and not bump into things. You know where you are in space and time. And vestibular is going to be balance. So consider your rules. In our house, we have a rule that you can climb on the coffee table, or in this house that we used to live in. We didn't have a lot of climbing space. So we said you can live in you can climb on the coffee table because there's no food on it and it's pretty low to the ground, and that's fine. And it's close to the couch and you can jump from one to the next, and that's great. We have a different policy around the dining room table because it's higher up and there's food on it and there's more going on in the kitchen. So you can decide, or you and your family can decide what feels good. Maybe you eat at the coffee table and you only allow climbing on the coffee table when there's no food. Children can understand this nuanced stuff, and that's okay as long as you're consistent with the rules that you decide. So if you want to, you can move the furniture around. Maybe you do this. I think we build a lot of forts as nannies. One of my favorite tricks is like moving the furniture on a rainy day, if I know the rain is coming and they're going to like wake up and we're going to be inside all day, I'm going to move that furniture around, and it's going to buy me a couple of hours of them just jumping around and feeling like they're in a whole new space. That's fun. If you have a child who's in a sensitive period for order and they're really sensitive about that, maybe you don't want to do that, and that's okay. So Montessori ideas for movement. We have a practice called walking the line, which I'll show you a picture of. We put a piece of tape on the floor and they walk across it very carefully. We carry heavy things. We have something called a lug-a-jug, where you would take like an old laundry detergent bottle and put rocks in it and then glue the top on, and then put like a white square on the floor and put it on there, and then put another white square on the floor in another part of the house, and they can carry it around and find where you've put the other white square and put it down, right? So this is the period, it's called the period of maximum effort, which is when they want to lift the heaviest things and they want to push the most and they want to run the fastest and they want to do all the things. So giving them heavy things to carry is really nice and regulating for their bodies and their minds. And washing a table and sweeping, I mentioned already. So here's walking the line. This is really cool. We had some walk the line activities. This is painter's tape on the floor. And then we went out into the world. This is in the Seaport District in Boston. I think Catherine's in Boston. Maybe you've seen this. And there's a light that they found on the floor and on the ground, and they were so excited to find it and walk the line on that. So they find it in their environment when we put it in at home. It was cool. Here is a movement space for an infant. So this is simple. I took this from the web. This is a very simple, very nice movement space. You can imagine a baby laying on their back is going to be able to do some grabbing at that stuff. There's a pull-up bar over there on the right with a mirror to the right? Like I think, I can't remember if we said this already, but infants can't really recognize their own reflection until about a year old, I believe it is. But they like to look at that cute little baby in the mirror. So it's nice to have a mirror in that space. And you can see it's just a mat on the floor. There's not much going on. It's a nice movement space. And then the babies are free to do what they want to do. So there's no walkers, there's no exercisers, there's no assistive devices to help babies get around. We just support their natural movement. And then on that shelf behind there, you can see a bunch of Montessori activities, which is nice. Some object permanence boxes back there, a top maybe, posting work. Okay. Here's another one. You can see that same mirror and that same pull-up bar. Another nice open space on the floor for a baby. And just a couple of things. I don't know why they had the lotion there on the shelf. Maybe this family's doing massage. I'm not sure. There's a little mobile with natural things on it. That's nice. A nice light, natural lighting. As much as you can, nice natural sunlight is always good. Okay, so here's a pickler triangle. These are amazing. If you have a family with a big budget, these are awesome to have. So to give you a concept, this is going to cost between $125 and $350. There are instructions to make it online. If you have a family who are very handy, or if you want something like this and you are very handy, you can do it for cheaper. I've never had one because I could never afford one and I don't know how to build stuff like that. But they're really fun and I always encourage families to get them because the children love them and they can do them for a long time. We're going to go for a cheaper version. Let's see. Can't remember what I have next here. Okay, here's a rocker board. These are fun too. These are, they become a bridge, they become a slide, they become, if you turn it over, they can stand on it and rock back and forth like they're surfing. They turn it up on the end and they throw stuff over it like a little net. These are very dynamic. These rocker boards are nice. I often invite families to get one of these because again, it lasts a long time. Like I can go on that. You can also do, you know, if you have a trampoline in your house, like a little kid's trampoline, those are nice to have, especially in the winter. That'll get some bounces out. A rocking horse. I got one of those like old school rocking horse. I don't know how many of you grew up in the 80s, but like we used to have those like bounce and they were always so loud with the springs. And I was at a yard sale a couple years ago and this person sold me one of these for $1. And I was like, I can't say no. I have to take this rocking horse home. And now I love it. So think about your space for being inside, having a child inside. If there are some behavior issues, and we're going to talk about this next, think about the environment that you have and if you have enough gross motor. So here's our home setup recently. We have this MDF board on the left. This is just like a type of, I don't know, particle board or something. It's very cheap from the store. And then I put a hassock and a child chair. And my child was really interested in climbing up and over and down and up and over and down. Then I went the other way, up the ramp and over the, so this will buy you some time. Safety first, safety first. Boxes, always a solid option. Here is some foam blocks. We used these all the time. These people had not a lot of outdoor space. They were in the city in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they invested in these and we used to make obstacle courses with them. These are really fun. Very simple. I highly recommend rings. This is a hard sell for a lot of people. Rings are amazing. Toddlers need to hang. This is a physical need. And if we don't provide it, you're going to see it. You're going to see them taking it. They're going to pull hair. They're going to push. This is a big, big one when you can meet this need, especially if you can have it available to them all the time and they can just go to it. When a toddler is feeling kind of out of it and all over the place and you can say, hey, let's go to your rings. We haven't used your rings in a while. Let's check that out. And that action is such a regulating, awesome action. So I made you guys a list on YouTube of activities, lessons, all kinds of things. We're going to send this to you in the final email. Eleni, I have to send you a link to put in there. But this is going to be a whole bunch of stuff for you. So you can watch the lessons, you can see these environments, you can see the works that we're talking about, and you can access it anytime. I think there's like 44 videos on there. So check it out. Okay, let's go room by room. Everybody doing okay? We're a little bit behind schedule, so I'd love to push through this before we do the next thing. Okay, cool. Thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, the kitchen. So, kitchen is a fun place. Here we go. Let's think about access to materials that the child can have in order to support in the home community, right? This is the goal. They want to help. We're going to see pictures on the next slide. If they can have access to an independent snack and work area, that's nice. That's nice for them. I had one family where the mom they happened to have this shelving. They had a really nice kitchen and they had this shelving and they had little Tupperware containers with like goldfish and raisins and nuts and all the things. And then children, when they were hungry, they could just go in there. This is a 2-year-old, could go in the cabinet. They chose to give their 2-year-old nuts. I'm not recommending it. It was a choice that family made. It worked for them. Safety first. They would be able to go into that cabinet and get what they wanted. They would put fresh clementines in there so the child could go in there and grab them and peel them and do that work. So it was all accessible and I didn't have to support and the child could do it independently. If you have a small work table and chair, that's nice for the child. You can also get a learning tower or a step stool. We're going to look at those. I recommend these items. We're going to look at these in the next. So these are nice. If you have small glasses, you don't have to buy small glasses. Those little yogurt containers that come in glass and ceramic, you can use those. It's an open cup. It's a nice size. A spreader is nice. Remember that jam spreading video that we watched with that child the other day? Those are nice to have. You don't need a child-sized knife. You can use a spreader that you probably already have in the kitchen. That crinkle cutter right there is a nice one. You would give a lesson on that, right? So you're going to teach a child to hold that handle with one hand and then keep their other hand on the top. So their hands are never in danger of getting under that. And that's going to be something where you're going to stay real close for a long time. But these are, a child-sized colander is nice. They can take the blueberries out of the fridge and they can put them in the colander and they can climb up on the step and they can wash them out and they can pour them in a bowl and they can make themselves a snack pretty easily with you standing by, of course. These pitchers are nice for dry pouring like beans or wet pouring water. They're nice to have matching pitchers and little dishes. You don't have to buy special dishes, but it's nice to have them down low and accessible. We're going to look at a couple of ideas for that. And then also consider for your space trays, cloth napkins, sponges, washcloths for spills at child's level so that they can reach in and grab them. My toddler saw me washing the floor the other day. I was washing the bathroom floor and they know where the washcloths are. I didn't realize, and they opened the drawer and pulled a washcloth out and started helping me wash the floor. So that told me that I have to make a space for them for cleaning tools because they're interested now. Okay. Here are some tong ideas. Toaster tongs in the middle. Those are nice. Little tongs, big tongs, all the different kinds. Think about them, try them out, use them. Sometimes those little metal ones are hard to squeeze because they're stiff. Sometimes those big ones are too big to get your hands around. So think about this as you're preparing your materials. It's all okay. You can try it all. Here's a kitchen helper. These are really nice. They're really expensive. This is a particularly expensive one. I think I got one for $100 or $120 for my first child, and then I sold it. And then we had another child. So now I don't have one. You can also, people will make you one. It's a hack from Etsy. It's a little less expensive. This is what we have now. It's a just a kitchen stool. If you already have one, it's no cost. Pretty easy. Here is an image from howwemontessori.org. This is a home environment, I'm assuming, but potentially it could be a school because there are a lot of items out there. If I had one child, I would put 1 or 2 things of each out. If I had 3 children, I might put 3 or 4 things out. So we don't want to overwhelm them. We don't want to make the plates into a stacking work accidentally, right? We just want them there for their function. But that's an idea of a little shelf. Nice and organized and everything they need. I would put napkins on that shelf too, and maybe placemats if you want to do the whole thing. Okay, let's talk about the bedroom. A floor bed. You can start with a floor bed from whenever you decide to start doing independent sleeping. If it's from birth, that's fine. I transitioned my first child out of a crib at 16 months and my second child at about 8 months. What you need to do is you need to make the whole space a yes space. Remember that from Rye, where you might have the room gated off. And you just need to be careful about what is in the room. So you can't have a rocking chair because they could pinch their fingers kind of a thing, or anything that they could climb on. Everything needs to be anchored to the wall, but you can do it. You want the drawers and closet accessible to the child. or a few items accessible to the child. You'd like some books for them to be able to access for when they're in there on their own. And we want to, as much as we can, keep the sleeping space separate from the work and play space. And if you're in someone else's home and they say this is the child's space and this is the place you have to work with, and that's it, and it's all together, that's okay. You can partition things off. Maybe you can hang a curtain, or maybe you can move furniture in such a way that's safe, that that the space feels separate. Right? In a classroom, that's what we do. We have to make it work. We have one big space that's open. So we have to just use the furniture to make it feel like a separate space. You want the art down low because it's for them to look at, right? Like this is their environment. When we're walking into their space, we want to feel like we're much too tall to be in here. So get that art down low. If you have a mobile, only have a realistic mobile, like whatever would normally be flying in the air, like a hot air balloon or birds or butterflies. Keep the sharks out. Like don't have a shark unless you're doing like a Sharknado theme, which I don't recommend. No sharks, no fish. Think about what's child safe, and you want to consider what can be climbed. So and you can do this whether you're sharing a room, bed sharing, or whether they're doing independent sleep. So here's an example of a very small space that they've made work. And you can see that chair in the back is an IKEA chair. It sort of bounces, but it doesn't really rock. So it's a nice one. There's no pinch place for that. There's a floor bed. They've put a couple of toys at the end of the bed, and they do have fish on their mobile. It's not going to be the end of the world, but if you want to do Montessori, I wouldn't hang fish. Nice small space, and it works. And there's some open shelves there on the back left. Here's our room. I'm showing you our room. We are currently transitioning to independent sleep. So one of us sleeps on the big bed and our child sleeps in that low floor bed, and then we support as needed. So very simple. There's not a lot going on. This is the view for the child when they wake up. There's the chair, and then there's a little bookshelf and a potty for practice. Here's an idea. You can buy these, but you can also just provide. What I liked about this image is that there's just a couple of items. You can see if you're going to help your child be independent, you can put one pair of shoes and 2 shirts and 2 pairs of pants so they can make a choice, but then it's also not going to be overwhelming. They're not going to take 8 shirts out of the drawer and throw them and you're going to have a big mess because everything's down low. You just want a couple of things. You want to think about, if this gets totally messed up, am I going to be cool with cleaning this up? Because our toddlers aren't going to be doing a lot of cleanup. Okay, the bathroom. Toddlers, they're the best. This was the first moment I realized I had a toddler. I was so excited. They refused to put their diaper on. They climbed in the potty, they unrolled the toilet paper, and they flushed the toilet. And I jumped for joy. I was so excited. I love the mischievous toddlers. Okay, so when we're in the bathroom, we want to think about all the things that we do in the bathroom. We look in the mirror, we brush our teeth, we brush our hair, we blow our nose, we wash our face. So let's provide that same opportunity for our children. Anything that you do in the bathroom, we want to offer that to the child. And if we can do it down low, there's less of a chance of falling off of a stool, right? Especially in a slippery bathroom. Sometimes there's tile, not so fun. So anything down low is nice. So if you can have a stool for access to water, that's great. Sometimes you might have a low down sink. If you have a family that really has resources and access to that, that's cool, not common. Mirror down low and a hairbrush. A nose blowing station is going to be a tissue box, a mirror, and a garbage bin to throw the tissue away. And there's going to be a lesson on watch me watch, right? So we're going to give that lesson, practical life lesson. And we want the toothbrush accessible. If you can, toileting happens in the bathroom. As we practice, we can start practicing for toilet learning from the very start, right? So we can have that changing area in the bathroom if you can. So in our house, we are physically able to get down on the floor with our children. So we have a very small bathroom, but we have a changing pad that leans against the wall. And when it's diaper changing time, we put it on the floor and we do the diaper change on the floor so that we're doing toileting in the bathroom, even if we're not toileting, diaper changing. And you can do toilet learning from birth. If you know about elimination communication, it's an interesting practice. If you want to learn about it, go check it out. It's that babies give signals. Some babies give signals when they are going to eliminate. And if we can tune into those signals, we can help them learn their body cues sooner. So it's an interesting concept. I've had some success with it. I think that it's up to the baby. Sometimes babies are into it, sometimes they're not. But it's interesting and it's worth checking out. Promotes independence and awareness. And then baby proofing. So decide what you want to do. You know, like this was Zavi. We never put a toilet lock on for Zavi because Zavi lifted the lid once and was like, okay, there's something in there. I'm going to go do something else. I'm done. My child now, we put a toilet lock on because it's just not worth the emotional stress of like, where's the baby? Are they in the toilet? What's going on? So have a conversation with your families about, you know, they don't have to put the toilet lock on. I had a family recently who said to me, well, when should I buy the door locks, the child locks? And I said, well, you don't have to do that. If you have a child who ends up like running away in the middle of the night, that's a different story. But you don't have to put locks on everything. You don't have to put cabinet locks on, right? Like you can move the breakable things and the dangerous things out of the low cabinets in the kitchen. You can put them in different cabinets so the child can then have access to all the cabinets in the kitchen. They can get to the pots and pans. They can get to the Tupperware. You can rearrange that. You can invite your family to rearrange that. I just did that for the family that I'm working with. We just, in anticipation of their child becoming mobile, we just rearranged their kitchen cabinet so that their child can have access to the bottom drawers and we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to put locks on anything. So here's a little hand washing station. This family really did it. I don't know if they did it for real, if they did it for social media, but this is, you would have this pitcher full and then the child could pour that into the bowl right there. And then they could have a little hand washing station and they could have a little toothbrushing station and they have towels down low. So this is a really nice space for a child. I'm showing you the ideal and you do what you can with the space that you have and what you have access to. Okay, final environment considerations. Learn about your plants. Don't have toxic plants in your environment. You need to know what they are. And if they're toxic, put them away for a couple of years. Put them in a different space. Where's the artwork? Is it down low? Put the mirror down low. Think about how clean the space is and how easy it is to clean. If it's a pain, you have too many items out and you're going to want to put some things back in storage if there's just like a huge mess and your children aren't focusing. Get down low, especially if you have a baby. Look up, look at what they see. Try your work first. Before you buy new stuff, see what's out there already, what you have in the home. Baby proofing, it may be necessary. Always anchor your shelves, always, always, always. Rye versus Montessori, just think about, you know, what kind of a space feels good for you, what works. And then you want to take the charge out. So that's child dependent. And this is back to baby proofing, right? So sometimes if you say to a child, if a child is interested in plugs and cords and they're doing this thing and then they're looking at you like, is this fine? Is this cool? Is this good with you? And then if you can take the charge out and you can say, that's the electrical cord, I can help you. We can have a lesson on that. And then maybe that's it. And then the child moves on, right? Because they're looking for a reaction. So if you can take the charge out of it, and be supportive and be there, maybe you don't need to child-proof that. Maybe they're done with it. And if it becomes a thing for them and they can't stop with the electrical cords, then you can put a block on it. I'm a big fan of taking the charge out of it. Okay. Here is one thing to consider. This is an IKEA on the left. This is an IKEA shape sorter. They got me. I thought it looked pretty. I liked the colors. I thought it was cool, and it doesn't work. It was made for adults to think is pretty and then purchase. It's not great for children. That ring in the middle or that post in the middle is rubber, so it's sticky. So my children, they're not interested in it. It's really hard to get those rings onto the dowel. They can't do it. And it never gets touched, right? There's no color order. There's no understanding of it. So I took all of those rings off and I asked my husband, he's a bicycle mechanic, and I asked him in the basement if he had any little metal rings. And sure enough, he did. And he gave them to me. And my child much, much, much preferred those rings. And now my child does this work all the time. And we put the rings inside of a wallet. I have like an old wallet and I put them inside so they can open the snap and then they can reach inside and pull the rings out. And it's much more interesting on the shelf. So here's my child I'm trying to give them a lesson on this, and they get frustrated because they want to take the ring off. This is a couple months ago. They want to take the ring off, but they can't get it off. I tried to show them to turn it upside down, but they couldn't figure that out. So I was trying to show them how to pull it off. And I'm trying to show them, this is when you give a lesson to an infant, right? Like they don't want to wait to have the lesson. They just want to do it. So I'm trying to show them taking all the rings off while I'm recording. So we call it a lesson, and it can be a very formal thing, and it tends to be in a 3 to 6 classroom. But when you're in a home environment, the goal is to show the activity with intention. And when you're with a baby, you're going to do the best you can with the what they're willing to let you do. Charlotte was like, Mom, I'm doing something else. Okay, so I'm going to move on just because we're running short on time, but you get the idea. So that's a lesson for an infant. You just do it on the fly, you do your best. Where to source your materials? Caden in this picture is sourcing materials from my favorite place, the recycle bin. These children spent a lot of time in the recycle bin. It was great. Monty kids, if you have a family with the resources and they want to hold on to these things, this is the simplest, easy way to do this. I'm just going to tell you right now, Monty Kids puts together packages by age and they will send them to you. And I think it's like $300 a month or something like that, or I don't know what it is. It's expensive, but if your families just want to do it that way, that's definitely an option. And it requires very little on work on our part outside of just like opening the delivery. I have not used them, but it looks pretty swanky. Montessori Services is a great catalog to buy Montessori materials. This is going to be on your resource list. So AMI has these free, this is the International Montessori Organization. Right now they have free digital downloads. Remember those cards I was telling you about that match up to the vehicles? Right now, I think because of the pandemic and they want people to be able to do this in their homes, they have printouts of like every category of the kitchen, of food, of furniture, of items in your house that you could then print these out and then make a language lesson out of them. So I highly recommend that. That's going to be on your resource list. The dollar store, I don't love it. It's an option. It's a lot of waste for our environment, but it's cheap stuff if you need to get some cheap materials, trays and napkins and things. My favorites, yard sales, your local Buy Nothing Facebook page. If you don't know about Buy Nothing, find your Buy Nothing page, and it's people giving stuff away that they don't want anymore. It's like a yard sale, but free. You can ask for stuff too. Source from what you already have. Everything that we need on this earth has already been created in some form or another. See if you can source it without having to buy it. And the dump, I love the dump. That's where I get as much stuff as I can. Not anymore, but we have a little in our town. The town where I grew up is a small town, and they had, we called it the swap shack. People would come and drop their old children's toys off, and then people with children would come and pick them up. So stuff didn't get thrown away. You can find people doing things. Okay, so let's go on to our room design. Here we go. So this is a simple design that this is a room that someone gave me and said, I have this spare room in my house. I want to make it for a baby and I want it to grow with them. What do I do? So I have a little app and I just put this together. This is really simple baby space. You can see it looks a lot like the space that we looked at before. So there's a couple of cushions on the floor. There's a little bookshelf. The app didn't let me put books on the bookshelf, but that's what that little wooden rack is there. A couple of toys. I didn't get to choose the toys. They just was what the app came with. The mirror is on the wall and there's a little hassock so the baby can eventually pull to a stand and then climb up and look out that nice window. So it's really, really simple. There's not a lot going on. There's that plant in the corner. I put a couple plants on the shelf. There's a lot of natural light in this room, which is nice. That plant in the corner is intentionally tucked behind in the corner behind the shelf and the table. There's a little work table that can grow with the child, but so that child can have that plant space and they can't really get into it. If you want to do an intentional work where you bring the child over and introduce them to the dirt and talk about the plant, you can move the furniture and do that. But otherwise it can be there and it can be not distracting. So that's one option. Here's another room that someone gave me. They had I think their child was 7 months old. There's a little thought bubble covering the child there. They said they're an avid crawler. They like to stand and carry things. Oh yeah, 7 months old, practicing elimination communication, and they're chewing, mouthing, and they like books, and they're in a rental house. So what could they do? So can you see what I said is I love the stool up to the couch because they can climb. And then they have the little bumpers on the edge of the stool, which is a nice thing for that baby. My question to them was, is the floor soft enough for inevitably when they fall? Is there some padding to cushion their fall and maybe move those foam blocks over there in front of the couch? And then also those, they said the bottom 2 shelves of the calyx there were for the baby. So I said, get rid of the basket. And if you have any other storage, dedicate that whole 4 squares to the baby so that they can have 4 squares. We can have open trays on there with a couple of activities for them. And maybe the bottom drawer of that dresser is going to have like a little secret. Maybe it's going to be like an object permanence dresser drawer. You know, we're going to put something in there they can go and discover every day. It'll be a little different. And if you're doing elimination communication, you do want a potty in the space, and the changing area is nice. I would move it to the bathroom if possible, but you have to be careful with elimination communication because you want to have a potty really nearby. And then the windows are up high, so you can't really see outside. So I would bring some plants into that space. And then also I would put some artwork down low so the baby has something interesting to look at. So that's going to be it on our environment. I'm sorry I feel like I rushed through that. I wanted to show you guys everything that I possibly could, and we started a little bit late, so we're a little bit behind schedule, but we're still going to make this work. So if you have any questions right now about what we just saw, and then we're going to go into looking over the environments that you sent us, and we're going to get into small groups, and we're going to talk about how we want to change those environments based on what we now know. And the way that this is going to work, because the only way that we think that we can have you all see the screen when you're in your small groups is that we're going to ask one of you in each group to be able to open your email and then screen share, if you can download that picture and screen share. So we want to be really respectful that like not everyone is a tech genius. I am not. I couldn't really do this without Eleni right now. Thank you, Eleni. But if you are comfortable with possibly opening up your email and downloading that photo and then screen sharing it, would you drop an emoji in the chat, or would you maybe just say that you're there? Oh, I'm missing so many comments. I want to see the comments. Okay. I can't wait. I can't wait to read these comments. So I see it looks like Trey is saying that they are down with it. Okay, cool. Sarah, thank you for jumping in. We're going to hope to have, just a few people in each group. So it's going to depend on how many people are able and willing to do this. We can have bigger groups if we need to. That's okay too. So let me see. And does anyone have any questions right now about the environment stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
I do. When you have a house and that is not safe for the kids, like a nice living room for adults. So I understand that we will designate an area for the kids to be and to explore, but not the whole house. It is an exploration environment. Yeah. So how do I introduce that rule? It's a rule. How do I make the kids, how do I introduce that rule in a way that is okay?
I am going to default back to Rye here and say gates. I would put a physical boundary up because I don't think it's fair to put children in a situation where they have to be told no, because they're going to want to be running around all the time, right? And they're going to want that space, because if it's open, it's their community, it's their home, right? And this is just how they feel. And when we put gates up and when we close off an area, and I worked with a family who had a big open floor plan. They had an apartment that was in Boston. It was a big apartment and it was way wide open. And we had to talk about, and they were saying, we can't keep this child out of the cat litter box, and we can't keep this child out of the bedroom that's not safe, and we can't keep this child out of this bed. And I said to them, I know. And it's really, really frustrating. And he doesn't have the impulse control to be able to stop himself when we say no. And the only way that we're going to do this, and I think peace of mind for all of us, is if we gate off this space. And I think when we talk about the peace of mind that we are going to get from it, and that are like we as the adults in the community are going to get from it, parents will jump on board because they start to get stressed, right? They're like, why are they constantly chasing the cat or whatever it is? And so when we can pitch it that way, I think that they start to understand, because it's not fair to a child to be telling them no all the time, and they can't. And it's not fair to you. I mean, you run around all the time saying, well, just stay out of the cat food and get out of the snack, whatever. And it's too much. So the only thing that I can recommend is really getting them on board with doors being closed, and then a safe space with gates. My house is gated completely. I have 5 gates in my house right now. So we have we pen everybody in where we need everybody at a certain time. And we can open all the gates up if we're all available, and we can have the whole space free. But gates are awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Yes.
Any other questions? We can jump back on more questions later too. I'd love to get.
I actually have a question.
Go for it.
So we have a 3.5 years old and a 9 months old, and we are trying to do 2 shelves. But I'm seeing like so many activities and different themes in your shelves. Like you have the language, you have the practical life, you have the math. So it's a little bit difficult to have all these shelves
Yes.
in a house. How would you go about that? Would you have like one activity per theme? Right now we have like a 9 bucket shelf for my older one and like a lower shelf for my 9 months old.
Yeah, I would try one. I mean, your practical life is everywhere, so you don't need to even set that up on the shelf necessarily, unless you want to have like a little sock basket. So you're just going to have that. But I think you could potentially put one of each. So you might, if you're thinking mathematical thinking, maybe you have one puzzle out and then you switch it out after a couple of weeks and you have, like a little stacking work or whatever it is. And then when you're doing your sensorial, maybe you have those fabrics out to touch. So you would just have one of each. And really in the classroom, as we're planning our works, we're planning 1 to 2 works per child. So our shelves are always pretty sparse. So I would say in your home environment, maybe you have 1 to 2 per area of what we're thinking about.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Super helpful. Thank you.
Cool. That's great. Okay, are we ready to do this? Also, everyone, if you can do your best. I know it's hard and it's weird to talk to strangers, but if you can and you're comfortable, try and jump in and like really look at these environments. This is a great opportunity for practice. I hope you're comfortable, and if not, that's okay. We're all just doing our best. Okay, so yeah, are we ready, Eleni?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, we're cutting it a little tight, so we're gonna have about 20 minutes to do this. If you need run to a bathroom break, we can do that, and we can also cut a little bit off of the next section, or we can go a little bit over again today if anyone wants to stay, but we'll try and keep it to the time as much as we can. So I'm going to be popping around different rooms, so I will see you all in there. Everyone, I'm sorry to jump us out of there. There are some great conversations happening, and I hate having to move away from that. I hope that you will keep looking at those spaces after the class and keep thinking through what could be different. And then if your space wasn't on there, get into your space and really have a chance to look at it. Maybe if you have a baby who's napping, you can just sit in the space and think about how they're using it and how they move through it, and what you might like to change. You could always take notes and share it with the families. With that communication piece we talked about yesterday, but I'm sorry, I hope that was helpful. I hope it was useful. That PDF should have been emailed to you this morning. And if it hasn't, we can make sure that it gets to you. Sorry about that, Surya, if you didn't get that. Okay, so does everyone feel ready to move on and start talking about our limit setting? Okay, this is our last section of class. Congratulations, you made it. Let me get us to what's coming next. I wish we had an hour to do that. That would be amazing. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, limit setting, welcome. This part has my whole heart. We are going to try to stick to our time so that we have time for questions at the end. So we're going to talk about setting up for success, house rules. What does that look like? Misbehaviors, whatever that means, and consequences. Let's talk about this concept of temper tantrums and resources and questions. Okay. So the first thing I want us to do as we move into this section is I want you to go back into the old memory bank and think about yourself at a young age. You ready? You got it? You got a picture in there? Okay. What is your earliest memory of being disciplined? Think through this for a minute. Okay. Is it positive or is it negative? Did you learn a lesson from that discipline, and was it the intended lesson? And now my question is, jump back to where you are now, and what are your thoughts to yourself now when you make a mistake? Are you thinking, oops, that was a learning opportunity, I'm going to do that differently next time? Or are you doing what many of us do, which is, I should have known better than to react that way. I'm so stupid. What did I expect? I'll never be enough, right? This concept. And where does this come from? So this is one of my favorite quotes. The way we speak to our children becomes their inner voice. This is really powerful. We are with these people at a very formative time, and we have an opportunity to provide them with a loving, welcoming, open environment. And let's do that. We have a short amount of time to do that. Let's give them that. So let's set everyone up for success. So the rules, right? Let's talk about rule setting. The rules need to be clearly and repeatedly stated. We're going to say something once and they're not going to get it. We're going to have to say it 20 times. That's okay. That's okay. That's why we're here. We learn through repetition. We still do. We're adults. We do it a little bit more in a socially acceptable way now, hopefully. But we did it all this way, and we all have to learn this way. So children know the boundary by 18 months, but for a lot of them, it will take years to have the impulse control to be able to comply. And then even when they have the impulse control, they still might not want to do it. Remember Horme? Remember that concept of that drive that they can't pull themselves away from? That's important. They're not doing anything to manipulate us. They're not doing anything to upset us. They're doing it because they have this drive for learning inside of them. It's the only thing they can think about in that moment. So we have to remember that they don't have a developed prefrontal cortex. They don't have a great concept of planning just yet. They don't have a great concept of what's going to happen when they do the next thing. They just need to do the thing. And they're scientists. They're always trying stuff out. They always want to do a new thing. They want to explore the next option. And remember what Magda Gerber says, earlier is not better. So some children, this is going to take them a lot longer than other children. Some children are going to get it and they're not going to be boundary pushers, and that's cool. Their life is probably going to be simpler than a lot of us. And then there are children who at 4.5 are still pushing those boundaries that many children have grown out of. And that's okay. Earlier is not better. And we talked about this. Remember, it takes toddlers 7 to 10 seconds to process a request. Wait for it. It's okay to wait for it. Remember, wait, wait, wait. So then we also need to check ourselves. Am I being in the moment? Are my needs met? So if my feet are hurting, or I'm having a hard day, or I've had some hard news, or I need a drink of water because I haven't had a drink of water in hours, then I'm going to be easier to be triggered by something because my needs aren't met. So I need to check in with myself. And then am I able to meet this child where they are? And maybe I need to meet my own needs before I can do that for a child. And it's okay to say to a child, I want to support you, but first I need to go go get a snack. I need to sit down because I haven't had a snack yet. I'm going to go sit down and have a snack. And then also there's this idea of like the dark space, right? Where we get to this place with children so often where it's like, you know, if I don't enforce this boundary right now, then there's going to be these long-term effects that are going to affect the child forever. I think parents are more likely to do this than nannies. I know for myself, I'm a much better boundary setter as a nanny than I am as a parent, because it's easy to go into that dark space. Or we think like, these parents aren't setting boundaries with this child, and I'm doing boundaries all by myself. And how am I going to do this all by myself? And like, we tell these stories to ourselves, right? Which makes it much harder. So if we're being present in the moment and we're just taking the task at hand and we're not drawing these big conclusions from it, it's much easier to set ourselves and our toddlers up for success. So house rules. You may be helping, especially if you're in a new family, you may be helping to establish these house rules. And if you're not helping to establish them, that's okay too. But let's make sure as part of our work that we're being communicated these rules, because we need to know if we let the children jump on the couch and then they go tell their parents, the nanny let us jump on the couch, and the parents come to you and say, what are you doing? And you didn't know. So this is where that communication piece comes in, right? Let's set everyone up for success. So we were talking about the dining room table versus the coffee table, right? Like sometimes it's okay to jump on or stand on the coffee table if that's an agreed upon like climbing space, and the dining room table may be different because it's higher up and it's more dangerous and there's more going on. That's okay. Throwing balls in the house. What are you okay with? We have a rule in our house that you can throw soft balls. That's it. It's the only thing you can throw. You can't throw hard balls. You can't throw things that aren't shaped like spheres. You can throw soft balls. That's the rule. And it's a very clear boundary. And then when the rule is breached, then we know that's the boundary. So going up the slide, is this a value for you? Can your children go up the slide if they want to? If it's important to them? What's the rule around if there's someone trying to come down the slide? You know, these are things to think about and to discuss. There's learning and everything. Sharing. Do our children need to share? Do they have to share with each other? If they're in the middle of something and they're using something and someone says, may I have a turn? Do they have to get it? No, they don't, you know, but maybe they do. Maybe that's the boundary with your family and that's what they want to do. So communicating that. And if you disagree with something because you have information that they don't have because they haven't done the research or they haven't read the articles that you've read, you can share that information with them. Sleep is the same thing. Sleep is a big one, especially for new families. Be patient with your families as they're learning to help their babies sleep. It's really hard to get babies to go to sleep as a parent. Nannies, we got it. Parents, it's like a whole different ballgame. I don't know why. So family meetings. Are you part of the family meetings? If you're a live-in, you might be. Can you help establish these? So you can start these early. We started these in our family when my eldest was 2 years old. And they're short. They're like 5 minutes long. And it's where we reinforce our family values. We set goals for the week, for example, and it's an opportunity to remind about rules that have been set. So if something's not working, if you're saying, you know, I know that last week we talked about the rule of being able to throw soft balls in the house, but I noticed that there's still some throwing going on and it's not within the boundaries that we've set. So what do we think? Do we feel like we need a new boundary? Do we feel like we just need more practice with the rule that we made? What do we think? So it's an opportunity to come together, and then always remember to start with gratitude and appreciation, right? I noticed that you had that new thing this week and you gave it to your little sibling, even though it was brand new. That was really kind. I don't know why. I don't know that I could have done that, but that was really cool that you did that. Thanks for doing that. So just gratitudes, right? Is a really nice thing to start. Boundary setting. This is my shaggy husband several years ago. We were out to brunch. So boundary setting is a part of all relationships in life. And when we're thinking about boundary setting, let's think about our family values. Okay. So in my family, politeness, it's not really a family value that we hold. So if a nanny came into my house and saw my kids sticking their face in their pancakes, they might just go, oh my Lord, what is this person doing? They're raising an animal. And that's okay. Like we would have to have communication. You know, our family values are around honesty and trust and respect and dignity and freedom of expression. So our family values are a little different. And based on that, every family is going to look a little different in what they're doing. So get on board with those family values, and that's going to help with the consistency. So the goals, what are the goals? And when we think about, you know, one of our major goals in our house that we talk about, and a lot of families that I encourage them to establish, is remember that concept of care of self, others, and the environment. When you have those 3 boundaries, those are big ones. When you cover those, you really cover a lot of stuff, and that's the basics. And you can get specific. You can kind of base your boundaries around that and your rules around that. That's a nice one to keep in mind. So when a boundary is breached, we can help our children return to it firmly but kindly. We never need to do the shame, blame, guilt game where we're saying you should have known better. If you did what I told you, you wouldn't have fallen off that chair. Well, maybe next time you'll listen. We don't have to do that, right? Like they're going to make mistakes. It's how it goes. We can be consistent, firm, and kind. Remember that no charge. We want to take the charge out of it. It doesn't have to be someone's fault. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be like a, oh, what happened? What did you do? I used to work with someone who every time a child would hit another child, they would go, oh, and I would say, can you not make the face with the thing and let the kids, it's like, because once they see that, they're like, whoa, I just did something really big. I just wanted that toy, but now I realize what I've done. And so I think when we can take the charge out of it, we can set ourselves up for success. So let's be fair, right? And this is why we need to be fair to each other, to ourselves, to the parents, to the children, and we need to clearly state the rules and we need to keep in communication about them. There's a lot of value in that. So let's consider our child's angle in this whole thing. Remember, separations are traumatic. Our children are wired to be near us. They're wired to be near their parents. So there is legitimately going to be some big, depending on the age of the child and the personality of the child, there's going to be some big feelings around that. And that's okay. And those feelings might come the moment the parent is leaving the house, and they might come an hour later and you don't understand why this child is losing their mind and throwing their blocks. But it's okay to stick with them and work through it with them. So transitions are hard. A transition for a baby is as simple as, depending on the sensitivity of the baby, holding a baby in an upright position to holding a baby in a lying down position. Babies can be really, really sensitive from one caregiver holding to another caregiver. That's a big transition. Transition for a toddler is going to be, leaving the house. You have to leave the house. That's often a really hard one. And we have to remember that toddlers are so present, right? They are doing their thing. And this is where we can learn from them. They're not thinking about the next thing they want to do. They are in the moment. This is the thing that we all pay a lot of money to relearn how to do from the gurus and the yogis, right? Be in the moment, be here now. We can learn it from our children. But this means that transitions are really hard for them. It's hard for them to think about doing the next thing when they just want to be doing the thing that they're doing. Also, they don't have a lot of control over the environment. When we tell them we have to leave the house in 10 minutes because we have a doctor's appointment, they can't just be like, no, I'm not going. We're going to pick them up and take them if we have to. And that's really hard. Sometimes there's things that if everyone spends time up on the kitchen counter and they can't access the kitchen counter because it's unsafe or they're destructive or whatever it is, they don't have control over that. So let's give them control as much as we can in the places where we can. That's why we want the freedom of choice in our environment, right? So during the day, they feel like they really have a level of control of what they're able to do with their time. So when we need something from them, their bucket is full and they're going to be more likely to feel like, I'm part of this community. Let's work together and do this. Stimulation. Children are easily overstimulated. They're very sensitive people. Remember the absorbent mind. They pick up everything. They can't tune anything out. If they're overstimulated, this can cause a big, big, big emotional storm. They don't know what to do with all that information. They can't process it, and it comes out in a big storm or a tantrum. So, and they have big feelings and they can't regulate them. They just don't know how right now. Sometimes babies, they just cry and they don't know, right? They're not crying because they know that they're crying at an acceptable volume that they need in order to get what they need. They're crying because they don't have a regulation around that yet. They can't do that yet. So it feels like a lot to us, but it's something for them that they need our support in getting through. And they can't regulate their impulses. That's that hormone, right? Okay, let's talk about misbehavior. The causes. What are the causes of misbehavior? So when a child crosses a boundary, let's look into it. Let's think about it. And this is a really valuable Montessori concept, right? So this is how we do this as guides. This is what we learn in our training. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our environment, and then we're going to look at ourselves as the guides. And the last thing we're going to look at is the child. So when a child is having a hard time, there are many, many, many possibilities. Let's go through each one of these. Is the prepared environment meeting the needs of the child? Is it stimulating enough? Is it not interesting enough? So let's see, for example, if they're pushing their siblings, do they have something they can push in the environment that we can redirect them towards? Do they have bars to hang on? Do they have a luggage jug that they can pick up Do they have a little push cart that they can push and you can put something heavy inside of it so they can push it? Pushing is a sensory need that they have. And so we need to meet this need. Are they throwing markers instead of coloring? Okay, maybe they want to throw something. Let's go find your ball basket. Let's put the markers away. It doesn't seem like you want to color. That's okay. Let's just move on from that. We don't need to draw attention to it. We don't need to say, don't throw the markers. Markers aren't for throwing. We don't have to. Just say, let's put the markers away. It seems like you want to throw something. We're going to teach them how to change that inside of themselves. And they're saying, oh yeah, I do want to throw something. They don't need to be blamed or shamed into not doing it. They just need to be provided an outlet. Banging, if they're banging something, let's go get your hammering work. You want to hammer something? I notice that you're banging a lot. Sometimes you can let it go. This is another thing, take the charge out of it. If they're banging a can on the floor because they want to see if it's going to bug you, and if it doesn't bug you, that's okay. You can just let them do it. If they're banging a can on the floor and it's too loud for you, you can be honest. You can be like, oh, that's a little loud for me. Maybe we could go bang something else. It's okay to be honest. And it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to apologize to our children too. Let's talk about that. Is the environment understimulating? Is the child being challenged? Are the materials too frustrating? So the pouring work, for example, if they want to do pouring work, they want it, but they can't access it for whatever reason. So this is all going to come through our observations. Is it overstimulating? Is there too much sensory information? And that's when we need to get down into that with the 5 senses, right? When you think about the 5 senses. So let's think about, if we've gone through the environment and the environment is meeting the needs, let's think about ourselves. Are we providing the right level of support? Are we allowing the child the space to complete the work? Or are we providing the necessary scaffolding for the child to be successful? So if a child is hitting their sibling and I'm standing across the room and I'm saying, don't hit, you can't hit, that's a rule, we don't hit in this house, it doesn't work. I need to be down on the floor, right? I, as the guide, need to be there. I need to be able to put a hand in between and say, I'm not willing for you to hit your sibling. This does not work for me. Are you okay? Are you okay? I'm sorry that you got hit. Okay. And then we move on, right? It's done. So we need to provide that scaffolding. Are we being conscious about the way we're speaking to the child? Are we tuning in and honoring their dignity when something needs an intervention? So sometimes when we do, and it's so easy to go into that because I think so many of us were raised that way, of the shame, blame, guilt, right? It's easy for us to go into that because we think that's what makes a difference and that's what teaches the child. But if we take away their dignity, they're going to be much less likely. I know if someone doesn't provide me with dignity, I'm like, I don't know who you think you are, but we cannot have this conversation. And I think children are the same. I know I've always been that way. I felt that when I was 5 years old. I'm not going to do what you want. You're being mean. How can I mitigate my own triggers in the moment? So if I'm feeling this, right, like this, the dark space, right? How do I get out of that? How do I recognize, like, oh, my child is just doing this one thing. They're not a hitter. They're not a biter. We can't call children, oh, I have a hitter, I have a biter. That's not it. Like, they're biting right now. They have a sensory need. Let's meet that need. So I have to be careful that I'm not going to the dark place and thinking that my child is going to be like a social deviant forever. It's okay. It's just a moment. It's just a moment in time. So if we've gone through the environment and we're good, and we've gone through ourselves and we're good, let's start looking at the child. What's happening? Are they simply being a toddler, right? So being a toddler means trying things out. Sometimes it's frustrating for us because it's not doesn't fit our values. There's learning that needs to happen. That's okay. Is there some need that's not being met? This is going to happen. They're not going to be able to identify, I'm tired. They can't do that. They just get crabby and they make poor choices. That's our job with our observation, right? We need to be able to watch for that. Is there a disruption in the routine? I can't tell you how many times I have been in a classroom where we have had a child who is like dysregulated all week. And then on Friday, mom will come and drop the child off and say, oh, I'm so glad dad's coming back tonight from a business trip. And we're saying, oh man, like, you got to tell us this at the beginning of the week. So if you can, pay attention to what's going on in the family. If the child has a new sibling, someone here is wondering about how to manage sibling relationships and how to foster positive sibling relationships. It's hard. And I'm sure there's a ton of experience in this virtual room right now of people who have helped support families do that. I think, positive discipline is always the way, and just sticking by our children and supporting them and understanding that it's a really, really hard time. We can talk a little bit more about that later. And last, but not least, but very last, right? Because we don't want to go here first. Is there a development ill issue that needs attention. And this is the final thing that we would come to. If we feel like every other need is being met, the environment is the correct amount of stimulation, it has all the needs, and we are providing the scaffolding that a child needs. If all of these things are in place and still the child is having an issue, let's start to talk about the developmental, if there's something developmental going on for a child. This is an important thing. These three, 1, 2, 3, the environment, ourselves, and the child, this order we go through every single day in a classroom. I do it every single day in my home environment. I do it every single day when I'm at work. This is a really valuable little list. So think about these 3 things, practice these 3 things when you can. Let's talk about consequences. Natural consequences versus logical consequences versus punishment. Is everyone familiar with these concepts? Have you heard of these before? Okay. So Montessori strives for natural consequences. That's what we always want. A natural consequence is the direct, natural result of an action. It is not imposed by a caregiver. That's when you dump your food. If you're sitting in a high chair and you dump your food on the floor, now your food is on the floor, you have no more food to eat. That's the consequence. You pour your water out, you have no more water to drink. That's the consequence. That's it. That's a natural consequence. That's the self-correcting work. The pegs don't fit into the hole. Okay? That's a natural consequence. A logical consequence is imposed by a caregiver or a parent, and it's a boundary related to the action. So you dump your food on the floor, and I say, I noticed that you dumped your food on the floor. You're not very interested in eating. I think you're all done. And I might help a child get down. That's because I've decided that they're playing. They obviously want to come down and play. We're done. There we go. And we can say, let's clean this up together. Let's go get our washcloth and we'll wipe up the floor. Do you remember where the washcloths are? Do you remember I showed you last week? Let's see. Oh yeah, let's go together. We'll go get the washcloth. And then they love that. They can be part of it. They don't have to punish them. There's no punishment. You don't have to be in trouble for that. You just have to take care of your work. You have to take care of the actions that you take. Punishment is imposed by a caregiver or a parent, and it's unrelated to the action or the behavior. So what this looks like is, I've told you not to throw your food on the floor. Go sit in a timeout for 3 minutes. The shame, the blame, the guilt, the punishment, right? We don't need to do that. Punishment has been shown to be ineffective. I have a few articles for you in your resources on this. Let's aim for the natural consequences. And when we need to, we jump in with the logical consequences. We should never, ever need to punish. This takes practice. If you are in the practice of using punishment, of using timeouts and rewards, this is going to take a little while, and that's okay. Just learn it as you go, do the best you can, and it's okay to change your mind and apologize. It's okay. It's important for the children to know that we make mistakes too. But changing this does take time if you haven't tried this before. No more timeouts. Behavior intervention. So these are logical consequences. Let's talk about when, how, and what to say. So through our observation practice, we consider carefully when to get involved if a child is behaving in a way that is concerning. So the 3 things we think about in a classroom are if it's destructive, dangerous, or disrespectful. The 3 Ds, right? We can do this at home too. This is really nice. We have a lot of meetings about this, about how to intervene with behavior. So let's think of some examples. Will you run through these examples with me? I have some for you. So this is something we've gone over. If a child is using a material other than the way we've shown them, if they're filling the sponge with water and they're squeezing it onto the tray instead of like into the bucket instead, would you intervene or would you leave it alone? Give me a thumbs up to intervene and give me a thumbs down to leave it alone. Thumbs down. I see a couple of, I see a thumbs up. I see a thumbs down, thumbs up. So I would, in this situation, personally, I would leave it alone. If they're working and they're doing it on their own and they're not harming anyone, that's okay. Now, if they're taking that water out and they're squeezing it onto the floor and they're potentially creating a puddle that they could get hurt and fall and slip and fall, maybe I'm gonna quietly go and get a hand towel and I'm gonna put it on the floor next to them. maybe I'm going to say something and I'm going to say, I'm just going to put this towel right here and let me show you. And I might just redirect their hand back into that, squeezing it back into the bowl. But if they're just squeezing it onto the tray, I'm going to let it go. It's okay. It's on the tray. It's close enough. How about if a child is pushing another child? Thumbs up to intervene, thumbs down to leave it alone. Okay, lots of thumbs up. I would intervene. When someone's actions impact another person's bodily rights, I'm going to intervene and I'm going to help set a boundary there because someone's having a hard time. How about if a child doesn't want to share a toy? We kind of just covered this. Intervene or leave it alone. I see a thumbs up. I see some thumbs down. I see a thumb sideways. Okay, I am a thumb sideways on this one. I think it depends. I think I am all for children working it out on their own. I think it's great when they can do that. I think oftentimes we step in too soon and it's okay to let them work it out on their own. But I think if it gets physical or if it starts to get frustrating, it's nice to go in and provide the language around that. Wow, you really want to use this toy. Oof, I see that. I see that you are trying to pull this toy away and you really want this toy. But I see that my friend over here is having a turn and they're working really hard. Do you see how focused they are? Do you want to sit down with me and we can practice sitting and watching? So when this might be an opportunity to invite our toddlers to observe too. Let's observe, let's watch. So I was in a breakout room where someone was talking about that they have 15-month-old twins and an older sibling. And so this might be an opportunity where we can invite the younger ones, if they're interrupting the big ones' work, to observe. And someone else was saying it's really important and valuable to have these mixed age groups together so that we can learn this. And yes, this is a moment where we can practice this. We can step in a way that doesn't solve it for them necessarily, but we can provide them the tools so that they can then manage this potentially next time on their own, but they might need us to do it with them 20 times, 100 times, whatever it is. How? So this is me smiling really big because I didn't really have to set a boundary in this moment. I asked my husband to take this picture of me. I got my wild eyes on. But you can see for the purposes of this photo, this is my youngest, and my youngest is really into the dog bowl and the water bowl. And we're trying to put the dog bowl in a part of the house where the dog can access it, but there's no real space that the dog can access that our child can't access. So we have to set this boundary all the time. So you can see that I wouldn't normally be smiling this big, but everything else is pretty realistic. I'm making eye contact. I'm down there at eye level. I'm putting a hand up if I need to. So my child was actually going for the water bowl in this moment. So I wanted to put my hand up. And instead of doing this, so when we teach toddlers to do this, so we teach them to stop, and they do this with other toddlers, it becomes a push. So they will push and they'll say stop, and then they push their body, and then that's not what we want, right? So instead we teach them stop. I think this is a sign for stop. I don't know sign language, but you can teach them stop. Please stop. Or I'm going to stop you, or I'm not willing for you to go for the dog bowl. So, and then we can do a gentle physical connection. If they need it, we can put our hands on their shoulders. We can do hand over hand of I can't let you, which this ended up being where I put my hand gently on my child's hand and I said, oh, I can't let you go in the dogs. And another thing I've heard recently is I'm not willing, right? So it's not saying like there's this universal rule that no one can touch the dog bowl. It's like, I'm not willing for that to happen right now because I'm not willing to clean that up and I'm not willing for the dog to not have food. So that's kind of an interesting phrase to consider and practice. And then we hold the boundary. And then when we're in it, our children are going to get upset, right? Because they're toddlers and nobody likes boundaries. Nobody wants boundaries. We all want to just do whatever we want to do. But this is part of our learning, right? So when I can breathe deeply and I can notice my own triggers in the moment, I can then release the charge from the situation. So I've set this boundary 20 times already today. I'm tired of telling you not to move the dog bowl. And if you can't release your own triggers and release the charge from the situation, move the dog bowl off the floor. It's okay if the dog doesn't have access to water for a little while until your child moves on. That's okay. It's okay. You can just remove that stimulus from the environment for now if you're done setting the boundary and you feel like it's becoming sort of a repetitive thing for the child. That's okay to do. Always assume positive intent. So this is a big one for the sibling relationship concept, right? So you can replace the word cat with baby. So instead of saying, no, be gentle, you have to be gentle with the cat. You can say, oh, look at how gentle you are. I love, you must be an expert. with this cat because I see how gentle you're touching them. That's wonderful. You can turn that right around for them. And you can, oh, and then if they start squeezing the cat, you could say, oh my goodness, here, let me help you. Remember, open up your hand and softly pet the cat. So we can do this for our toddlers. We don't have to tell them, no, stop all the time. We have to tell them, no, stop. I highly recommend saving the no and the stop and the yelling for when they're running into the street and you can't reach them. That's the only time I would recommend it. As a parent, you might yell more than that. As a nanny, hopefully you don't. So language is really, 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 really important. The way we talk about our children, right, to other parents, to other nannies, to other adults, to the siblings, and in our own heads, the way we think about our children is a big deal. So there are times, right? If you've ever been pregnant or ever known someone who's pregnant and they've gone past their due date. And a lot of times people will say, oh, I guess you got a stubborn one in there. And when we set that up, right, even before birth, when we say that someone is stubborn, we then create an energy around that. And we build this idea and it doesn't seem like a big deal, but when we say these words, it impacts our children and they hear it. You know, like when we say, I have a coworker who says, I think I told you this yesterday, the children, they never eat broccoli when we offer it as a snack. They never eat it. I don't want to do it. And they say it in front of the children, or they'll say, you never eat carrots. I'm not going to give you any carrots for a snack. When we put that in our heads, the child says, oh, I guess I'm someone who doesn't like carrots. Okay. And they're not going to try them again. So it's really important to keep that open. Let's keep our ideas open about what we are willing for them to be, right? We don't want to close those boxes or close those doors for them. Let's talk about temper tantrums. I don't love calling them temper tantrums. I just don't. I think I like to call them big feelings or emotional storms. I think a temper tantrum is kind of it's mean, you know, when you have a friend who's acting out, who's an adult, and if you wanted to insult them, you would say, oh, they had a temper tantrum. You know, like it's not like a respectful way of saying something. So I'm going to call them big feelings. So temper tantrums are really, really important. I have a very articulate and lovely article for you. There's nothing better in the world than this article. It's going to be in your resource list. It's by Hand in Hand Parenting, and it really explains it all. And they talk about it like it's an emotional sneeze. So we think about children not being able to get their way, right? And we think that, boy, are they going to be spoiled because they're not getting their way. And the reality is that not getting their way means that they're not able to focus. So let's reframe this, right? They're not able to focus on the thing they want to focus on. So if this happens all day long for a lot of reasons, because they live in an adult's world and they live in an adult's environment, then eventually it's going to build up and it's like a sneeze. They're going to have to get it out. They have a lot of buildup and it's not going to be pretty and it's not going to be related to the thing that they're actually doing. And we're going to be like, what is this? But it's a cue for us to know, and a clue that we can then know that there's something else going on for them. It's usually related to something else. It stems from built up frustration, fear, lack of dignity, overwhelming feelings, or if the child feels like they're not being heard, right? This is why we want to give them choice. It can have to do with a disruption of focus. And again, if it's attention seeking, pay attention. We talked about this a little bit at the end of the day yesterday. Attention seeking behavior, a lot of people will say, don't give them attention. They're just trying to get your attention. No, this is what we want to do. We want to give them attention. They don't know how to say, I'm having a really hard time with this thing that happened a few hours ago, and I don't know how to handle my feelings around it, and I'm feeling really emotional. Can you sit by me while I just cry they can't do that, but it's still there, and they're capable of those big emotions. So let's give them the dignity of sitting with them. And we are their guide through this place. They get scared. They get so frustrated and so scared. And then if we tell them, I'm not going to have a conversation with you until you calm down, they can't do that. They need us there. We're their support system. We're like their therapist in that moment, right? Like we're the one who can walk them through this. So what we do is we have to be able to make space for those big feelings. And at the same time, we can set a boundary. So if I have a child who is kicking and punching and they are in it deep and they're strong because they're 2.5 and they mean it, I'm going to stop them. I'm going to block them. I might hold their body and I'm going to say, I'm going to hold your body and just keep you so safe. I'm going to keep myself safe. I'm going to say, I'm not willing for you to hit me. I'm here for you. And I want to hear what you have to say. I'm not willing for you to hit me. And we can set that boundary. This is not laissez-faire caregiving, right? This is allowing the big feelings and setting boundaries at the same time. And we don't need to teach in the moment. We don't need to teach about what's going on. We just need to be there. And after it's done, we can talk about what has happened. So let's see, I might have a slide on that. This is a really important concept. My child is not giving me a hard time. My child is having a hard time. When we can remember this, it helps reframe it for us and it will help us get through these moments. I want to talk about Super Nanny for a minute. Do you guys know Super Nanny? Y'all familiar with Super Nanny? I hope we're not using Super Nanny's practices. It's pretty outdated. It's a lot of that shaming, blaming, and guilt. I think the problem is that a lot of people know this kind of discipline practice. And I think it's going to be hard if our parents were raised in a similar way and they see that these boundaries that Super Nanny is setting, Super Nanny makes the kids stop crying. She makes them stop crying. She does it with threats and she does it with punishment. And it looks like it works because they do the thing that they're supposed to do at the end. And if you go and find yourself a Super Nanny clip, I wanted to show you one, but I don't know about copyright stuff, so I didn't. But if you go and find a Super Nanny clip and look at it, I want you to look at it from the child's perspective, and I want you to look at what you think the child is trying to say and whether the child is being listened to in that moment, because they deserve the dignity of this moment, right? And so I think that we have to, if you have parents who are into Super Nanny, this is something that we're going to have to work with them on by sharing resources with them that are different from maybe what they're used to. And if you like Super Nanny's practices, I would invite you to check out the resources that I've sent you, because I think there's another way. And I think it's a valuable practice. So let's talk about how to support in the moment. Timeouts versus time ins. So timeouts, I think we all know what timeouts are. You have to go away from this space until you're ready to come back, or I'm going to set a timer for you and you need to be calm because you're out of control. A time in is I'm going to sit with you and we're going to sit here together. And we're going to work through this. And you don't have to talk. You don't have to say anything. Just be with them and keep them safe and keep yourself safe and keep the environment safe. We want to think about changing the behavior, not the child. This is a nice concept. There's nothing wrong with the child. They're just making a poor choice in this moment, or they're having a hard time in this moment. Co-regulation, they need us to co-regulate. We can't separate ourselves from a child who's having an emotional storm. They don't know how to regulate their own emotions. They just don't have it. They don't know it. And when we put our bodies, co-regulation is the act of really putting your physical body and your physical energy near a child who's having a hard time. When we put our physical body and it is calm near a child who's having a hard time, they can co-regulate. They can regulate their emotions based on our demeanor. Empathy, let's have empathy for what the child is going through. And remember, dignity, respect, and empathy in these tough moments is really, really, really key to success. It doesn't mean we're allowing the child to hit us or hurt us or scream or get their way. And it may be that I see that you really, really want that thing, or you really, really want to watch a program right now, and we're not going to watch a program while I'm here. I know that's usually what you do, but I had a conversation with your mom and dad, and we're going to switch things up a little bit, and it might take a little time to get used to, and that's okay. And I'm here for you. I know that's hard because you're used to watching TV this time of day. That's okay. And they might scream and kick and cry, and that's okay. It doesn't mean they're going to watch TV. It doesn't mean they're getting away with anything. They're just experiencing those feelings. I see you. I hear you. This is really hard for you, and it didn't go the way you'd hoped. I get that. And we can really get that, right? You can think about a time in your life when things didn't go your way. Oof, I get so mad. It's hard to control that. When we practice reflective listening and thoughtful verbal support, you didn't like it when I gave you the purple cup instead of the green one. We don't have to give them the purple cup. If you already pulled out the green one and filled it up, it's okay. You can have the purple one tomorrow. I hear you. You don't like that. And so we can label feelings, but we want to be careful about not being presumptive. So I might say something like, you seem angry. Are you angry, feeling angry? Or I might even just say, you seem upset. Are you upset? And then we can provide that emotional language for them. So the next time they can say, oh, I'm so angry. I'm so angry that I didn't get the purple cup, or I didn't get the green cup, or whatever it is, so that eventually they will have that language. And I have a 5-year-old now. We've been doing this his whole life. And now in the last, I would say 6 months, he's able to come over since the baby's been born and say, I feel really sad because I feel like I haven't seen you today. And I really want to sit down and be with you. And it's really nice to have that. And probably it's just a matter of development, right? It's just a stage too where you learn, but we can provide that language. I can say, I'm right here with you, and I'm not willing for you to hit me, or I won't let you hit me. So let's think about what we want to avoid in these moments. Let's not have a lesson. The feeling is the lesson, right? That's the intrinsic piece of it. They know how they feel based on this thing. That's okay. And in this moment, if they're out of control and they're not thinking about the thing and they're just out of control, they're going to think about it afterwards. That's natural. They're humans. So if we say, well, you're tired, if you'd gone to bed when I mentioned that you should have gone to bed, then you probably wouldn't feel this way today. It's not helpful. Teasing and laughing. I think sometimes it's easy to say, oh, you're making such a big deal about this. Is not a big deal. You're fine. And I want to respect that culturally. I think that there are different ways of handling this. And I think that every family is different. And I think that our children choose their families, they choose their parents. And I think that we all have things to learn. And sometimes this is what you do. And I respect that this is a way of helping a child learn emotional control too. So if this is something that someone's doing intentionally where they're saying, this is fine, you're fine, then I'm not going to step in the way of that. I would prefer to not downplay the seriousness of the situation and not call someone dramatic. We're not going to do timeouts. We're not going to ignore the child in the moment. If they're attention seeking, we're going to give them the attention. Okay. So, long term, let's model self-regulation. So when you think about this, how do you manage difficult moments for yourself? How do you and your partner argue? If you're with a child and you're on the phone with your sister and you just got some like weird news, or her boyfriend just did something that is like totally outrageous, are you yelling on the phone while you're at work? Like, even if you're at the park and we think they're not looking, or maybe your mom just called you and she's like, I'm not coming this weekend. And you're saying, oh, what? We had this whole plan and we're doing this whole thing. We just have to watch ourselves, because when we think they're not watching, they are. And how do we manage difficult situations? How do we talk about other people? This is, I think probably when we're at work, we're not having these hard conversations. Hopefully we have the professional composure to save this stuff for our personal lives. But it does come up, and stuff comes up. Like if you stub your toe and you start running around and cursing, like that's going to be a thing. Hopefully you're not the one who teaches your nanny children the swears. Hopefully their parents are the ones. Observe your own triggers and what's keeping you from allowing yourself to access the triggers. So if you're having a hard time and you can't figure out why, right? Or if the child is crying, and I'm trying to think of an example. Do I have an example here? Let's see. So I'm thinking like if every time the child, eats with their hands instead of their spoon, and it bugs you and you want your child to learn how to eat with a spoon. And then why? What is that value? Is that a value that this family has for their child? Is it a value that it's because, it doesn't mean that it's not okay to ask them to eat with a spoon. It can be important, but let's think about why it's important. Because if we have a reason and we understand what the rule is, it's easier for us to explain it to the child. And apologize when necessary. I forgot that we said we were going to read our bedtime stories in the living room tonight. That must have been confusing for you. This happened to me with my child, where he threw a huge fit when we were going to bed and I couldn't figure out why. And it's because he'd asked me something earlier in the day and I totally forgot. It's okay to apologize. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I made a mistake. I'm going to try and remember next time. Maybe next time, can you remind me before you get upset? Could you give me a reminder, because I just forgot? Or if you get angry, hopefully you won't. As a professional, you won't, but here's an opportunity. If you're a parent, I felt angry and I lost control. I yelled at you. I shouldn't have done that. I made a mistake. No one deserves to be yelled at. And practice forgiveness. Always practice forgiveness. When the children have a tantrum, we can let it go. That helps them let it go. Sometimes they're embarrassed after it happens, right? It happens. We'll just keep each other safe. That's what we'll do. We'll do it differently next time. And the long-term goal is always connection. So, things to say. I can't let you. It seems like you're upset. Reflective listening. Oh yeah, the red ball. Yes, you really wanted the red ball. I hear you saying that. Not too many words. We're not providing lessons. We're not, the words can be overstimulating for a child who's already overstimulated. So This is our opportunity, right? To decide what lesson do we want to give? What person do we want to be? What role do we want to play in this child's life? So when we put a child in timeout, we're saying your feelings are too much to handle. This doesn't work. You're not supposed to feel this way. And I'm going to be available when you sort yourself out. Or the opportunity is to say, I'm here with you no matter what. I'm going to keep us safe. I'm going to walk with you. We're going to walk together through this. You're not alone. And I'm going to help you learn how to manage these big feelings because I believe that what you're feeling is valid. This is a powerful practice. This is a trust building practice. When you start to offer this gift to your nanny child, they start to see you as the interpreter. Remember that concept? This is an honorable position that we are in, and we need to hold it very carefully. So remember that children need co-regulation. We are their safe space. If we abandon a child during an expression of negative feelings, we teach them that they have to manage these big, often scary feelings alone. Remember that quote, we are our children's inner voice. If we can appropriately support a temper tantrum, we can come out of it feeling connected and calm. It takes longer. It takes a while. And it's, it's much bigger investment on our part. We might be sitting with someone who's crying for 20 minutes. And if you're a sensory sensitive person, this can be hard. I find that my own children's cries impact me a lot stronger than any nanny child ever. So hopefully you are not as impacted by crying. So reparenting. Reparenting is not the psychotherapy practice from the 1960s and 70s. It's the idea that we can have a do-over for ourselves by being gentle when we screw up. So even if you're not a parent, this is okay. If you answered those questions in the beginning and you're thinking about the way that you were parented and it's impacting your world and your relationships, this is an opportunity to reframe that inner voice. And you can recognize it as a habit that needs changing, and you can change it. So there's this book called The Conscious Parent by Shefali Sabari. I highly recommend it. The Conscious Parent is going to be on your resource list. She also wrote a book called The Awakened Family, which was the next one, which is really nice. She says, often it's the adjustment of expectations rather than the reality itself that's the hurdle that we have to leap. This is a nice thought. I appreciate this thought. So I want to address a couple of questions that people asked me recently about how to manage behavior. And then I want to get to all of your questions because I imagine there are a few. Let's talk about respectful diaper changes. How do you get them to lie down and how do you help them with dressing? So when you have a child who's in that movement period, right, the sensitive period for movement, and they are all over the map and they do not want to lie down. And it's really, really hard to convince like a mobile 10-month-old to be still for a diaper change. So how do you do this respectfully? This is a hard one. I would be interested to hear how you all do it. I think the strategy that I use is we just go slow and we make sure we're not in a rush so that we have time. I sing songs. I will provide a little toy basket that's next to the changing area where everything is washable, right? So that if any poop gets on it, we can just toss it in the sink or in the dishwasher. I think that, and these toys are only allowed during diaper changes. They're put away for the rest of the time because we want these to be like very, I don't like using this term, but I don't know another term. When we did dog training, the dog trainer said, you need high value treats for when you have like a situation where your dog needs more than regular treats. So I feel like these are like high value toys because they're not seen. Maybe if you have a battery operated toy, you could put this one in the bathroom for the diaper change. Is that respectful? I think it's better than having to hold a child down. How do you help them with dressing? I think time, lots and lots and lots of time. Let's give them lots of time. How to help them understand respect around faces, glasses, and hair, repetition. And, we just have to keep going through it and taking that charge out of it. And then what do we do when the parenting strategies don't align with our values as a caregiver? how do we manage that situation? And I think in that situation, I've talked about this a little bit, and I'd love to hear what wisdom you all have to share. For me, I feel like it's about sharing resources and also understanding where the parent comes from. So like I said, I feel like I knew a lot of stuff about child development and babies, and I knew a lot of stuff about how to take care of a baby. And then I had a baby and I was like, whoa. So I feel like my boundaries changed and my ability to set boundaries changed. And I have a lot more compassion for what parents go through with their children. And I think, providing that empathy, not only to our children, but also to the parents, and having those conversations that are kind of tricky conversations about so I feel like this is hard for me because it doesn't work for me. I've tried this with the child and this is the response that I get, and it doesn't feel like it works for me. But I'd really love to hear about how this works for you and why this is a boundary for you. And I feel like if I can understand it, I'm going to be able to implement it a little better. So having those open conversations, and it's not judgment, right? Like I understand that like you have your reasons for why this is a boundary in your house, but I just want to understand more about it so that we can then work together. And I had a conversation with someone about sleep training recently, where they felt they didn't know. They thought they just had to sleep train. They thought that was the thing that you did. And then I said, we don't have to do this. There are other options. The pediatrician will tell you this is the option. And if you want to, for your mental health, if it's important for you because you feel like you're not getting enough sleep, and this is impacting your relationship with your partner, like let's talk about our options. But if you're doing this because you think this is the option because this is what the doctor said, I can give you resources and we can talk about other things. So understanding more about why things are happening and having that open communication can be really valuable. And I'm in a position, again, where I feel confident doing that. Right? If you don't feel confident and you are in a position where it's not a great position, it's not a great job for you, you may not have that option, so how does that work? How does that work? So just things to think about. Okay, so final notes. We're going to send you a resource list, and then I want to do questions with you all. We're not going anywhere. Eleni, I'm going to send you the link to the resource list and the age by age guide. Your password is going to be TIN for the Intentional Nanny 2020, and that'll be in your email too. So you actually don't need to write that down right now. And I just wanted to say to you all, let me see, I'm going to come see your faces, that I had such a good time yesterday when we stayed on afterwards, and it was so valuable to me. And I didn't realize, I think I said this at the beginning, but I didn't realize how much I was missing community until we were all on chatting. And I think this is such a valuable moment for so many of us that we're here and we have each other and we're all interested in the same things. 0 to 3 Montessori nannies is like, this is like a very specific population. So I was thinking, I'm not holding adventure nannies to this. I'm saying for you, from me, the intentional nanny, that if you guys want to do this, I was thinking maybe like once a month, we could say like Saturday for a couple of hours, we could just get together and you can bring your issues. Like, what are you thinking about? What's your environment like? Let's just okay, I'm seeing lots of enthusiasm. This is great. I think it would be really fun to kind of just keep, because like social media is nice, but it doesn't feel real. It feels like it's all for the pretty stuff. So great, let's keep talking. So I guess the way that we could do that is, if you want to do that, the best way for me to reach you, Eleni, I don't want to have you guys have to organize that. If you guys want to email me, and I put my email up at the beginning, but maybe I can, let me share my screen again. It's Katie at The Intentional Nanny, and I put it here. You can find me on Instagram. It would be easier if you sent me an email because I will contact you. I know people do like Instagram lives and stuff, but like, I feel like Zoom is nice because we can all see each other's faces and we can talk. And so if you want to do that, great. And you don't have to sign up for anything. It's just like let's just keep hanging out if you want to. Okay, did you get that? So I want to take time, because we're at the end now, and say thank you so much for joining, and I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. Does anybody have questions? question about any of the material from yesterday or today that they feeling like?
I've got a 3.5-year-old who doesn't get a lot of gross motor play opportunities during the day. I technically only have him for the last like 2 hours of my day with him. And usually by then he's doing a lot of spinning and he's racing around the room. And he's obviously, he hasn't had that need met all day long. I usually just have the baby and he has another nanny.
Mm.
And I want to bring in something like, you know, something to climb on or something to hang on, but I know the other nanny is like not down with any of that. How do I, any ideas on how to address that or kind of bring that into my time? Or I don't know. I don't know how to go about this at all. And I don't want to step on her toes and the parents are really not, I guess, aware. And I don't want to, I don't know. I don't want to cause trouble, but also that's like when you started doing the gross motor stuff, I was like, this is what we need so much.
Yeah. So I think my first question would be, is the child doing that sort of stuff when the other nanny is with them? Maybe it's an earlier part of the day and that child is not exhibiting the same behaviors because they're not as worn out. They're not as tired. They're not as whatever by that point. So maybe she or he or they doesn't see that. I would say, it's a possibility that you could just do it on your own time, but I'm also interested in what the other nanny's background is, because I don't understand why, like if there's a child whose needs are not being met and then you would offer this, do you know why that the other nanny might say that they weren't interested in that?
I have to say she's very, very cautious and she's a very kind of more nervous personality already.
Okay.
It generally doesn't happen on her time. But with her, he spends a lot of time kind of seated or doing activities where you sit on the floor and, you build with Legos or they sit and color um, and things like that. So there really just aren't opportunities for her to see that anyways either.
Yeah, so it seems like, and then this child knows that when they get to you, that you're somehow going to be able to meet that need because they're sharing that with you, which is nice.
Yeah.
I think it's a nice idea. You could talk to the parents, and I wouldn't leave the other nanny out of the conversation. I would say, I'm noticing that when I'm with this child for whatever time of day I'm with them, that they have this need. And I want to be really respectful that that you're super cautious and you're feeling, well, I don't know if you know this or you want to assume that they know this or you want to ask, how do you feel about this? But if they say I'm uncomfortable with that, then you could say, potentially we could say, after 3:00 is when we bring the rings down and we can do the rings, something like that. So that the child can understand that there's a boundary and it's a consistent boundary. Or when you're with me, I'm sorry, I didn't see who's talking to me.
Brandy.
Brandy. When it's my time, when it's Brandy time, we're going to do the rings and we're going to bring out the mat and we're going to do the tumbling. And that's okay. I think that there may be some lower risk options, and I don't know how cautious this person is. And if they are willing to do some reading on it, you might also say, hey, I noticed that, Scott seems to be very high energy when I have them. And I was just reading this article about the importance of moving their bodies and what it means in terms of their behavior. And I just wanted to run it by you because I know you spend a lot of time with him too. So I think sharing resources and then being open to the other person's perspective, I think it's really cool that already that, they're not comfortable with that. I think that's really valuable to be taking their perspective in to consideration. And I think once you have that communication out there, as long as it's respectful, I hope that you will be able to provide that environment for that child because it sounds like they need it.
Yeah, I think that's it's one thing that I've got a lot of experience with kids that have sensory needs. So it's one thing that I've really noticed. And I'm also I'm new to the situation. I've only been here for 6 weeks. So I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but also I know his needs aren't being met. So I want to figure out a way to bring that up. So I really love this. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. You're welcome. And also just remember, don't underestimate your value in that situation. You're there and you're a professional. And especially if you have experience with children with sensory needs, it's okay to come in and say that and say, I've worked with children who've really benefited from this, who've shown similar behaviors. And I think it might be really beneficial. That's okay. You don't need to step on anyone's toes to also, to have value in that situation. So just a reminder for that. And that's for all of us too. I think sometimes it's easy when we work with families, the nanny is not like, there's always this power dynamic, right? In this situation, we are employed by these people. We are traditionally less educated than the people that we're working for. We are traditionally of lower value, right? This is like a big thing. Like, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this out loud, right? But like for me, finding my voice and being able to say that I'm a valuable person in this home has taken me a long time in my career, because I'm working for people who make more money than I do. Like that's hard. And I think that like we have to recognize that we are child development professionals and we have great, great value in this environment, and to not underestimate our value in being able to provide resources for families and being able to support them.
I will say one thing with wealthy people or very privileged people is don't be afraid to set that boundary. Like, I'm an expert, I know what this is. Because it's surprising how much, if you just do a little pushback, not a big pushback, I mean, obviously be polite, how much more they'll actually respect you. Like, if you're not somebody who gets walked on, but you're somebody who's like, I'm an expert, this is what I know, and I think this will be a great thing for your child. I guess don't be afraid to don't step on the toes, but don't be afraid to get near the toes, if that makes sense.
Right. And I think also part of being an expert is to be able to say, I value, oh, my child are having some gross time downstairs right now. Can you hear them? I think that there's great value in saying, like, I really respect and value your opinion. I see that April here in the chat has just said that they asked the grandparent, what could we do? How could we do this gross motor movement is really important. How can we do it in a way that makes you feel like this child is safe? And then we can have that conversation. Okay. Does anyone have another question?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Thank you, Katie, so much for all your information. It's just so nice to be able to connect the same ideas. I have a special question about praise, parents that praise constantly, which are always being disagreed, but I felt myself in a position to zip it up because I didn't want to get in a field that was going to open a can of worms, and I'd be quiet, even that it's not my way. I don't praise the kid. I'm exactly in your mind frame. But my 3 families, 6 kids that I did raise, the parents, grandparents, the whole family constantly and praise more than the needs.
Yeah, I think that's a hard one if you're surrounded by it so much. And I think, again, this is another cultural piece, right? Like, families have been families for thousands and thousands of years, and people do it differently all over the world. And it's okay. I mean, we're not going to change an entire family based on it. My go-to is always resources. If they're willing to read resources, and how do you approach it? And, because you don't want to say to anyone, you're doing it wrong, right? Like, there's value in that, in helping your child be seen. And people have been doing it for years, and people do it because they think that it's supportive and it's helpful, and it can be, right? But maybe you say, oh, I was just reading this really cool article about praise, and they were talking about how that praise in a really directed way is actually really supportive. So I was reading, and it was saying, instead of saying good job, that I could say instead, maybe turn it around on you, make it about you. That instead of saying good job, maybe I'm going to try and say, wow, you worked really hard on that for a long time. You were so focused on that, and you finally finished it. So if you provide them with some phrases in a way, I often phrase it as, this is how I'm working to change my practice, because I just read this thing and I want to do it better, and I want to run it by you because I feel like it could probably benefit all of us. And then you just see what sticks. You don't have to like hammer it home. You just throw it out there and see what sticks. And does that help?
Yeah, that's what I do.
Oh, great.
That's what I do, because that's my whole mind is it's important for the child to learning that you only get things through efforts. So, no, it's not about it to expect a good job.
Do you feel like the parents are receptive to the way that you're communicating it?
I never had a feedback. So I don't know.
But is it, and it's not changing for them?
No. It's like it's the way that they I think it's more culture. It's a competitive culture that basic. I think it's, I don't know how much it's going to help to be a grown up that expect everything that you do is because someone's going to say a good work.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to,
It's
when
a
you,
hard one.
yeah,
It's very in the culture. It's like it's not only the parents. When you go outside in place, it's constant good work, good work, good work. You did a good job, good job, good job. It's like it's almost like that ongoing.
yeah. I mean, I think, you can also be that person in their life, and it may be hard depending on the child's personality. If there's one person in their life who's not telling them what a great job they're doing all the time, that child may be like, well, this person's kind of cold, like what's their problem? Or that child may be like, I really feel like Selma kind of sees me in a different way than other people. And they might perceive that, they might pick that up. And so I think the only thing you can do is be you and keep doing it. And I would say share resources. It sounds like you're doing that. And then also just make room for that cultural piece, because it's going to be in there. And if it doesn't align with your heart and you have an opportunity, for me, sometimes, to be honest with you, if I can't align with a family, it kind of dissolves after a while, I find. And it's always on a good note, because I think families feel that too, where it's like, why are they never saying good job? Why are they not, that may not be the straw that breaks the camel's back. But for me, if my heart is not aligned, it's much harder to feel at peace in a position and stay in that position happily for a long time. I don't know. I'm getting personal now. That's maybe not, it's not my personal recommendation.
Can I add on to what Selma said? I second everything Katie said. It's so great. But a couple of things, Selma, sometimes we just have to accept or trust that our influence with the child is happening, even though, because they're with us a lot, like a lot. And they might be getting they might, like Katie said, be just interpreting mom and dad's thing as flat rather than the other way around. And if they're siblings, sometimes you can like teach them. I don't know, is there an age difference? Sometimes I teach the 5-year-old how to talk supportive to the 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And I might even say something like, you can say good job, but that doesn't say a lot to the little kid. Here's what we can say when Felicity shows us her painting. Oh, it looks like you have a lot of nice color. You have some colors. Do you want to tell me about it? And sometimes when we teach them the proper way to do it, then you have a 5-year-old who knows how to talk to a kid better than the parent, I guess, which is kind of ironic, but it's like they appreciate that. Like I taught I statements to the kids recently, and their parents aren't even doing it, and the other nanny doesn't do it. The kids are complaining to me about what the other nanny does. They're like, she mocks us. And that just breaks my heart. And I said, well, you could use an I statement with her. And, sometimes the children are going to learn these methods better than the adults around them. But then I'm teaching them to take care. I'm telling them that their feelings are important when I teach them this method. So then they feel really affirmed. Okay, I want to show you this. This is a classic. A lot of people already know it. But I'm about to give it as a gift to my 5.5-year family that I'm leaving, but not really leaving. And it's a thank you gift for lots of stuff that they did for me, but also tell her, I know you're a busy parent and this has cartoons in it. So
there's also a version of that. If you don't know it, it's how to talk so kids will listen, and listen so kids will talk. There's also a version of how to talk so little kids will listen.
Yeah. And
so there's a version for our age group here. And also someone just said unconditional parenting by Alfie Kahn. Alfie Kahn's a great one for this praise concept.
Yeah.
That's in the chats. Also positive discipline is a really nice one by Jane Nelson. These are going to be in your resource list as well. So I want to be respectful that it is just about 3 o'clock. If you need to go, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you joining us. And if you want to stick around for a couple more questions, I can stick around for a little while. And if you want to email me, and I'm not going to send you a bunch of junk. I'm like, I don't have it that put together to like send you mail all the time. It would just be to do get together again in a month and do Zoom. And like, I would facilitate, but then my thought is that we would all just kind of participate and bring up, let's see, whatever comes up, whatever anybody's going through. But I'd be happy to host it.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions at the moment? Any final thoughts? Hey, Catherine.
I don't have a question, but I do have a final thought in regards to like discrepancies with discipline and parenting styles and praise and whatnot. I think it's good to see the value in children having very different, attachments and relationships and all those things with their parents and their caregivers. But ultimately, I think it's best to either let it go or move on. There's a lot of families that will align with your particular preferences. And the fact of the matter is that the kids that are in the position that they're going to be fine. Like, it is very unlikely that their life will be anything other than successful, happy, safe, secure, what have you. And ultimately, it's not our responsibility to mold them into like they're not going to be our responsibility when they're 35. Like, the only thing that you can do is do your best with the time you have with them. And like Monica said, like when you're with a child 40, 50, 60 hours a week, that's making a huge impact. And there's always and I find myself getting frustrated even at like the playground with other parents with like overpraising and like forcing kids to share and like forced apologies. And I find myself getting frustrated. And then I realize that was 30 seconds of the 14-month-old's day. She is with me 55 hours a week. That's going to have a bigger impact than a random lady at the park telling her to apologize. So I just think it's important to have the mindset of like, you can't change families. You can either just like stay true to what you believe in with the time that you're working with them, or you can move on. That's also another option. Like, especially now in a current like employment situation, you could find a new job literally tomorrow and it would be fine. So that's just what I want to say when it comes to, I think it's good to just let it go. And if they are receptive to other information, that's great. Just be prepared that they may not be open to that. And so you can only control what you can do. So that's all.
I think it's hard too, because I think that we get, like part of our work is getting attached to these children. It's hard to have this level of relationship with another person and not develop an attachment. And that's part of it, right? Always knowing that it's temporary. It's always temporary,
yeah.
Right? But then also like making sure. And so this is why I set a boundary from the beginning with my nanny children. And I guess it's to protect myself, but I think it's also to protect them. That's why I don't do a lot of hugging and kissing and cuddling. And if you're a live-in and you are with this child 60 hours a week, like that child's going to need hugging and kissing and cuddling, and it may come to you, and that's valuable. And I'm not saying don't do that. Absolutely. Children need that. But for me, my boundary is I want that cuddling to come from your families, because that's going to be your long-term people, and those are the people that you need to develop that relationship with, as opposed to it's a professional relationship. If something changes, I could be gone in 2 weeks. The reality is, and I want to be really careful that I'm taking care of that little heart, that they're not, if potentially, and I have relationships now with 18-year-olds who I talk to on the phone, who I nannied for when they were babies, and like I changed their diapers for years, and you still have relationships with a lot of these people. But I think we have to be really careful and protect the children and understand that like their main bond is very, very importantly with their families. So however much hugging and kissing we do, we just need to be careful that we're protecting and we're not jumping into that relationship. I don't know why that made me think of that, what you were saying.
Thank you.
I think it's just because I mentioned the amount. I think sometimes when you say like when you're spending, I don't want to give off the impression that I feel as though I replace the parents, because I do.
Yes. No, I'm sorry.
Spend more time. I do objectively spend more time with the child than the parents do. It's just a fact of the matter. That will change eventually. Yeah. But I just like with when you're having like not necessarily disagreements, but like discrepancies between the parents, I think it's best to just like tip it, unless notwithstanding like neglect and abuse, just to like let it go. It's temporary. If you look at the parents, the kids are 99% of the time going to turn out like the parents are fine if they're hiring a nanny usually. So I think it's best to just like let it go.
We do that in a school environment too, and we think about what a big influence the peer group has. And that's not so much when you're dealing with infants and young toddlers, but older toddlers, I would say over 2 and really over 3 And then especially as you get into that older, 4, 5, 6 group, peers have a much, much, much bigger influence. So if you are in a group with a few children and you're building a community, that those peer relationships are going to have a huge impact. So being able to support social negotiations and all the things that go along with that in a positive way, I always think that's going to have the biggest impact. And that's the idea of being a guide, right? Instead of a teacher, is like being able to provide support in those situations and for those relationships is always really helpful as they get older, I guess. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions?
I have questions about, I know when I was in a classroom, it was really important to like have a record keeping and everything. And now that I'll be doing Montessori with 2 children, it kind of relieves the pressure of that. But I'm wondering, in the last 15 years, there's lots of apps and things that make it really easy. I'm wondering, since you were also in a school recently, do you recommend any of the ones? Somebody mentioned Transparent Classroom right now because you can message the parents, or maybe it helps make materials lists easy. Are there any that you're aware of, or you have colleagues who work with those, or should I just skip that because like just be in the moment? And
I think I'm going to go old school Montessori here and just say notes on a pen and paper. I think it's really valuable for our children to see us not looking at our phones.
Yeah.
In terms of note taking in the moment, I think that it's really nice for them to see us picking up a book and reading it, or whatever it is, like turning the tech down for them because they're seeing it everywhere. It doesn't matter; it's just everywhere. So I think in terms of taking notes, I really only try to have my phone. I have my phone on silent all day when I'm at work. I don't have it in my pocket. I put it on the shelf when I walk in and I leave it there. I have the ringer on now because I have 2 children at home and I want to have my husband, I'm available for him, but that's it. I don't text. I don't look at my phone. It's just like when I'm in the classroom, I don't have conversations outside of what I'm doing with the children. And it's beautiful. And this is where that like meditative piece comes in for me again too, right? Like there's so few places that I can get away from technology. And so it's so nice to have that reminder at work that I don't have to be in my phone. And I think taking notes on paper is such a fun way to do things. Because it's so like our children don't see that anymore. We used at my place of work, we used Parent Square, but I think that we used it because it was a platform. It was kind of like Facebook, but it's like a private thing where you can post school-wide, or you can just post to your classroom, or you can just post to a parent. But I think if I'm just working with one family, I think email for me is easiest. I don't know about any like specific note-taking platforms. Down with apps, up with things you can hold in your hand.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Hi. As you, Lisa. Hi, Lisa. Oh, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, great. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
So I take care of 3.5-year-old girl. So she goes to school half day in the morning and then come home, lunch, take a nap. And then after nap, we have 2 hours to do play together and do some activities. And I really want to do activities like all sorts of. And the thing is, getting her to do activity together is the hardest thing for me. Even if I get her to do activity together, I set up they have a very nice little tables where like chairs and like everything set it up. And even if I get her, like the first thing, it's just a struggle for like to get her attention to do her activities. Even if I get her to do activities, it's gonna be really short, like should be done, like so it's like how I can like get her into it, and just like if we can do for longer, like it's really challenging for me.
Yeah. So I feel like okay, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say I wouldn't have her do the activities. I feel like depending on what it is, and I would ask what's the motivation behind the activities and what's the purpose of it? Is it something that you want? Is it something that you feel like the child needs or wants? Or is it something that the parent is asking you to do? And then I would consider that if the child's been in a program for half a day, they've probably been doing activities all morning and they've been asked to sit down and do these things for the first part of the day. So by the time they come home, right? Like, can you imagine if you were at work all day and then you went home and then someone was like, let's do some more work. Like that might be a lot. you know, maybe she would want to, maybe she needs some other need met in that moment. Maybe she needs some gross motor activity first. Maybe she needs some snuggle time. Maybe she wants to socialize and talk about her day. Maybe if she's in a Montessori program, she might've been asked to do work all morning, and now she wants to just chat and talk. You know, maybe she wants to run around and have a dance party. I think it sounds like there's some need potentially that's not being met, rather than her not wanting to do it. So that's my first thought. What kind of a program does she go to?
I don't know exactly. It's more
Not Montessori.
Not really. It's like more nature things.
Oh.
Yeah.
And what kind of activities are you asking her to do in the afternoon?
So mom has set up, like, so mom is really good at the Montessori things. So they rotate every week, and they have a little shelf, like 6 things, like so. We do with letters and coloring things, or sometimes puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So I think this goes back to the conversation we were having a little bit yesterday afternoon about, you know, like what so many children are going through in terms of COVID. So let's take the idea of productivity out of it for a moment, right? Oh, hey, little friend. And I think, you know, there's great value. Hi. I think there's great value in freedom of choice, right? So if we're asking someone to sit down and do something, they're not being given that freedom of choice. I also think that particular age range is really interested in self-expression. And, you know, I think we have some 3 to 6 experts in here, but in my experience, one of the reasons that 3-year-olds are so tough for me is because all this fun, like, hey, let's do this thing together. I've got this thing, all this like pump you up stuff that I have in me for toddlers, it's gone. By the time they're 3, they're like, I know what you're doing. I'm not going to do that thing. I'm going to do my own thing. Like, forget it, you know? So I think, really ask yourself what the value is of it. And if you want to have that pushback, and I think that pushback is never worth it to me. Like, there's got to be another way. And games are awesome. Games are really fun if you can make a game out of it. If you want to do like a letter, you know, you could put letters up all over the house if you wanted to, and then you could make a little card. If you had letter A, if you want to learn the letters, right? If you want them to be able to identify letters, you could have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you could tape them all over the house. And then you could have little cards that say A, B, C, D, E, F, G on them. And you could say, go find the red A, and they have to run all over the house. So they're getting that gross motor movement. And then they're also getting that letter recognition in there. So I think there are ways to do it, but potentially asking someone to sit down and do that work is not so fun. Maybe they want to do a game and socialize at the end of the day. That would be my guess. I hope that helps. I hope you get some creative
Great.
thoughts.
Thank you so much. Yes, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I will try the letters on. We are really working on the letters right now. So
yeah. And I don't know, again, I mean, we were talking about this too, 3.5, it feels, you know, we have families who feel like it's really important to learn that stuff at that age. And I think reading books is a fabulous way of learning sounds, letters, expression, speech, language. Like, there's so much value in reading chapter books. If you know, at 3.5, you could probably read a few chapter books, short ones. My Father's Dragon, there's a couple. And fewer pictures so that imagination comes into play. And when you start working that imagination, it's going to be as valuable as looking at letters and being able to, I think, recite what the letters are at this age. And of course, we have to go with what the parent wants, right? So let's try and make it fun for the child while meeting the needs that the parent is asking us to address too. That can be a tricky balance. Inez, you are muted. Can you unmute yourself?
I have a question. Thank you so very much for the whole program. I'm learning so much. I'm so excited.
Oh, that's awesome.
Learn. So, do you see any problem with classic music for sleeping time or any kind of meditation music during sleeping time? Because usually that's what I do. I'm a fan of music, so.
I don't know if you noticed, I think I used the word sleep one time in this whole program. I really felt like I knew a lot about sleep as a nanny, and then I became a parent, and now I'm like, oh baby, there is a lot more to this. Sleep becomes really, really hard. And I have done so much looking into sleep to try and figure out this puzzle. And I feel like every human being is different. Everyone sleeps differently. They go to sleep differently. They stay asleep differently. If you found a system that works for sleep, you go for it. People are like, don't use a crutch, don't use a sound machine, don't do this, don't hold your baby to sleep. Don't just, if you get someone to go to sleep, good on ya. You won.
I'm waiting.
I think Montessori is promoting independence, right? So we're thinking about how to do that independently. I don't see why classical music or meditative music would be against independent sleep. It might make it trickier if they go sleep at grandma's house and they don't have the same CD, but everything's on an app now, so you can just send grandma the music to the phone. I think it's probably fine. I don't know. When I'm an expert on sleep, I'll let you know. We'll have that class next.
May I add to that?
Yes, please. Who's that? Oh, hey, Trey.
Hi. I actually am a professional sleep trainer. That's kind of literally what I do. And I agree. I think that every family is different. You customize the plans based on what it is that that's conducive for that family and that environment. And if you get them to sleep, that's the main goal. So I'm the same exact way. If it is a sleep machine that works and sound machines and all that, great. But if it doesn't, if it is, you got to hold him. Like I had a little one just Friday night where if you put him down before he fell asleep, he would wake up in 5 minutes. But if you let him fall asleep in your arms, he slept for 10 hours. Are we going to really go back and forth about this? Let the baby fall asleep, put him in a crib. Like it's simple as that. So the main goal is to let them sleep. So if that works, keep it going.
Okay, I gave the right answer. Look at that.
I know.
Thanks, Trey. Okay, I have probably about 10 more minutes if anyone has any more questions for me or for each other. You don't just have to ask questions to me. You're welcome to hang out with each other too.
I have a question about co-regulating. How do you do that when you have multiple kids in like a room? And so like if you're co-regulating for, say a 3-year-old, and you have like a 13-month-old that's like walking around in the same room, but you really need to spend that time with the older one and like, getting them back on like an equilibrium. Like how do you navigate that with a toddler or even with an infant that you also need to have eyes on that might just be running around? I know that's kind of just like in a Montessori way, like how would you like approach it, I guess?
Yeah, so my first thought goes to the environment. So our environment is hopefully set up for independence for everyone in it. So hopefully that environment is a safe space for your 13-month-old to be in. And the reality is you're not in a classroom, you're in a home. So as much as you can get the family on board with, did I tell you guys that we got rid of our dining room table recently because we couldn't keep our 13-month-old off of it. I just was so sick of like this struggle this was the trigger, right? So I was like, we're not having a dining room table. We'll bring it back in a few months. But right now we're in the movement stage, we're done. And everyone was like, great. We're worried about the child falling off too. My husband and my other one were like, we're tired of this baby falling off the table. Let's get rid of the table. So we're in a home where we're like, we're going to make this environment work for everyone in it. And that's wonderful. You may not have that. You may work for fancy people who have fancy things and they want their fancy things out in the world. And you have to do the best you can do with what you have. If you don't have a completely safe space, I would say to that 3.5-year-old, I am here with you. And I would sit with them as much as I possibly could. And I would be looking at the 13-month-old. And if at some point the 13-month-old is going to climb up on something that seems unsafe, I would say to the 3.5-year-old, I need to step away for just a moment to help your sibling. And I'm going to be right back. I want to keep doing this with you. I'm right here with you. And I think giving that intention of understanding, they might scream because they're like, no, you're mine right now. And part of this whole thing that I can't even say out loud is that I'm so upset because your attention is divided between me and my sibling. And how could you go away and see my sibling instead of be here with me when I'm freaking out? And like, that's okay. They're allowed those feelings, right? And our job is to keep everyone safe. And that's where your personal boundary is just going to be really, really strong. And you're going to say, I very deeply care about what you're going through. And I really want to be here with you. And I'm going to keep your sibling safe too. I'm going to be right back. You don't even have to say, I'm going to be right back. You can just say, keep going. I'm right here with you. If you're going to be near and you're going to be near them and you're going to be able to see them, have a visual on them. You can even, as you're going to help the sibling, you can have eye contact with that 3.5-year-old and be nodding your head while you're helping the little one come down off the dining room table. You can be saying, I hear you. I hear you. So I think that validation is there. Does that help?
Yeah, my problem, it's more outside, I guess, where this usually occurs. And we have a lot of room, thankfully. We're very blessed with that, but there's so many pockets of areas that, you know, kids can escape, you know, like kids, it's so fast and it happens so fast and you're outside, you're not contained. So I guess that's where like my question was coming from, but that does help. Cause I mean, usually most of the time I'm keeping my eyes on the other one anyway. But I'm always scared that I'm more a cautious person anyway. So I'm always scared when I do take the other one off, then that one's going to run, run. So it's more of an outside thing, I guess, than inside really, but that really does help.
What's happening with the 3.5-year-old outside that they're getting so upset outside?
They're usually, it's more about things like wanting to go different ways. They're at both the kids are at very different points right now. And so when we go outside as a group, it's, I want to do this, but the other ones, I want to do this. And of course, the older one is at a point where he knows that maybe we can't do that right now, but the younger one doesn't. And that younger one's just going to take off and be doing that, naturally, because they don't know how to stop themselves. So I think it's more about like wanting to do separate things, going different places, but there's just so much room that it's hard to do that at the same time, that we have to like take turns going to different things and doing different things.
And is it like a fenced in yard?
No, it's part of it is our backyard is, but it's about 22 acres. So it's,
wow,
yeah, so it's not fenced in at all, like the backyard is for the dogs, but in general, it's a farm setting and it's 22 acres. So it's, it's expansive and there's no lines.
Yeah, I think part of that is going to be getting the 3.5-year-old on board with being part of the team. So when you have, and someone again, addressing the sibling issue, right, is like, this is hard. This is one of the hard things about when we have a sibling is that sometimes now, I know before you could do whatever you wanted, you could go wherever you wanted. And now we have to start thinking about what other people want too. And that's a hard adjustment.
Yeah.
I get that. Why don't we do this? Why don't we today, we're going to run in your direction and I'm going to carry your sibling, and whatever pile you want to go play in, we're going to go, and I'm going to bring some stuff outside with us. I'm going to bring some special sand toys for the sibling, or I'm going to bring whatever, I'm going to bring the riding toy. Where do you want to go set up? I'll carry your sibling and I'll carry the riding toy and you take us there and then we'll go hang out. Or maybe you have something more structured happening where like you put the sibling in a carrier if you can baby wear. I don't know, but if you're able and you can baby wear and get that sibling in a carrier and then get the older one to say, let's go on a treasure hunt. Maybe you do something in a more directed way. And then the next time you go outside, we're going to say, I know that you really want to do this. You really want to go for a walk over here to this part, but today is your siblings' day to choose where we're going to go. So let's go. And we're going to take turns and we're going to learn how to do this together. So I don't know if that exactly addresses it, but I think understanding that like even though the baby doesn't understand, or the young toddler doesn't understand that they have to respect taking turns and making choices together. I think it's okay to implement that strategy where everyone gets a day, and then the younger one will learn that eventually they have to kind of go and do something they don't want to do. And the older one will learn the same thing essentially from a different developmental stage.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really helpful. I appreciate that.
I don't know if I have all the answers on that one. If anyone has anything better to say, please chime in. Siblings are tough. I think the best thing we can do for siblings is provide supportive statements of saying, like, I know this is hard. I know this can be hard. I did this with mine before our baby was born, as we had a conversation. And if you're in a home with a family that's about to welcome a new child, you can always say this of like, we're going to have this baby. It's going to be a little different when the baby gets here. It's going to be a lot of work. There's going to be a lot of crying. I'm not going to be able to help you all the time like I can now. You're getting pretty big, and I know that you can do a lot of stuff by yourself, and you're really, really good at that. Like, you can get your own water, You can put on your own shoes, you can, whatever it is. You have so much practice at so many things. I'm going to need your help when the baby comes. Maybe you can help me out with some stuff. So that's really nice. And then also once the baby comes, one of the things we talked about is like, I'm going to not be able to snuggle with you as much as I could before. Like we snuggle all the time. And like so this happened, right? I remember before I had my first one, after I had my first one, I remember thinking, oh, I miss my husband. Like I don't ever get to snuggle with him or touch him or be with him. Cause by the time I put the baby down, I'm like, oh, so I think that happens like when you have a second baby, to be able to say that, or when you have a second baby coming into the home, to be able to say that to the first one of like, we spend so much time sitting on the couch reading books, and it's going to be awesome because when the baby first comes, we're going to still be able to do that. We're going to have so much couch time snuggling with the new baby, and then they're going to get a little bigger and they're going to want to do their own thing. And it might get a little tricky, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to stick together. We're a team and we've got this. And I think if you keep that team mentality is how you build a positive relationship with the siblings too, right? Because that's the ultimate goal, is you want that positive relationship with the siblings. Okay, sorry, I went on a rant. Any last thoughts or comments? I don't want to say goodbye. You guys are so fun.
Thanks so much for all your expertise and everyone's who shared too. It was nice to get to hear from everyone.
Thank you guys. It was so nice to connect with everyone. I hope we stay on top of the Zoom once a month, because it is really nice in a profession where you don't have coworkers to have this community. So thank you, Katie, for everything, and thanks for all the other.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. This was like I'm really like so psyched to be tuned into this group right now, and I hope that we keep doing it. And if you have other like 0 to 3 Montessori nannies who are interested in coming and having a discussion, this doesn't have to be just us. We can like invite other people to the Zoom too. But make sure you send, how are we going to do that? You're going to send me an email, right? Send me an email to my email account, and then I will put you on a little list and we'll get together. We'll shoot for January after the holidays.
Okay, great.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, everyone. This has been so fun. If you have any questions in the meantime, just send me an email. I'm happy to chat.
Thank
you all.
Bye.
I love this.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hit end.
Thank you.
Contact.